tall Hessian soldiers in the basement of the building. Basically, there was also, a lot of things, like, for example, like a lot of the women that would be at the bar would be basically like sitting down, and they would feel like someone was breathing down their neck. And another report of that location was basically when people were all watching the news when they aired the episodes of General Wayne back in the 1980s, they actually brought some unsolved mysteries where the camera, actually the actual TV was actually rotating clockwise. And it was very bizarre. It never happened before, never happened after. And it's been called the Inn of the 17 Ghosts, because there's 17 spirits that have been reported there over the years. And several people had also basically feel that there was actually a regiment encampment near basically Philadelphia. So right outside Philadelphia, there was a Hessian encampment in 1776 under Colonel Raw. And the spirit that might be at the General Wayne Inn basically might be one of those left behind Hessian soldiers that were there. So when I started getting into that episode, I started researching more and more about the paranormal and reading books by Ed and Lorraine Warren, also reading books by Hans Holzer, and many other famous paranormal authors at the time. And I just started really getting involved in more and more, and I started developing a major love for it as early as 7 or 8 years old.
Oh, wow. You got into this when you were young.
Yes,
absolutely. I watched those shows you were talking about. I really got it. Anything History Channel, I was about and got into it. I didn't get into so much the paranormal, but that when you mentioned Ghost Hunters, I've watched that show religiously and followed them on Facebook, and that was one of the very first shows I actually became a fan of, where I kind of followed what was going on. I always thought they were cool.
And I think they were definitely pioneers. Before Ghost Adventures and Paranormal State with Brian Buell and all the other major shows out there with Amy Allen, basically the Dead Files, Ghost Hunters were the first one that I met Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes several times, and I've investigated with Grant Wilson, and he basically tutored me a little bit and showed me how to use some of the equipment. And what was amazing at that time was there was not a lot of ghost hunting shows on TV. They were pretty much the first one to do it in the fall of 2004 when Sci-Fi started airing with Jason and Grant. It was very revolutionary because nobody had ever captured the team basically going to locations and investigating and capturing evidence at that time period, because it was only talked about in like books and actually private investigations, but to be able to do it mainstream the way they did it, and it was one of those popular shows, and it inspired Zach Bagans and Aaron Goodwin and Nick Ross to do Ghost Adventures. So it's amazing how all of that evolved the fall of 2004 when Ghost Hunters first came out.
Okay, I know that was one of the shows that when you watched it, you really got a sense of they were really trying to capture what was really going on. I mean, it wasn't a show that had, that was scripted or like that.
It didn't have talking points, and I wanted to say one of the first episodes that really got me into watching them was basically when they did their investigation at Eastern State Penitentiary. And to me, that location basically housed like Al Capone. It was closed down in 1971 and has years of history. Major gangsters stayed there, and basically the place was in operation from 1820 to 1971, and for years has had so many ghostly sightings over the years from people seeing, like, and when Jason and Grant first went there, they had basically went down some of the actual main corridors, and several times basically they would go, and all of a sudden the cell doors would slam by themselves, and Brian Harnoy, one of the early investigators in some of the early seasons, ran out of there because they got spooked, and basically never went back for that investigation until later on, a couple years later.
Now, I remember they did one. It was I think it was an insane asylum on an island where Nick got attacked really bad.
Yes, I remember that one. And that one was really scared the heck out of me. And it was one that basically you would not want to be able to basically forget. Basically, it's one that you want to watch over and over again. And it was like one of those ones that, holy heck, they went there and it just they basically made the hair on your arm stand up.
Yeah, I remember because when he came out of the building, he took his shirt off, and he was all red on his back, and you could see where he was attacked.
Oh, yes. And I had seen similar situations when I studied the case of the Sally House back in the 90s, where basically they claimed a little girl named Sally and her mother had basically attacked a couple that was living there, and this person, the father that was living at the Sally House, had a similar paranormal experience where he would get marks all over his back and on his wrist and his hands, and for no unexplained reason, and basically documented it on for a haunting on Travel Channel.
Right. Now, do you worry about that when you're doing your investigations? I mean, it seems, the bigger paranormal gets, the more people that go into it. But a lot of those shows that I did not like, I only watched one or two, and I'm like, oh, this is not even real. But are you worried about getting attacked on some of these sites that you're investigating?
Absolutely, and I especially definitely feel sometimes going out on some of these locations that we're going to be going out on in the future, there's always the risk of basically you don't know what's there, you don't know what's unseen, and the risk of basically the best thing that we can do to prepare ourselves is to have holy water ready to go, and also basically make sure to try our best to research as much history of that location as possible, and then do a walkthrough with maybe an administrator or officer person or somebody that works at that location, and do an interview with them and walk through the areas of activity to find out what type of experiences that people have had at that location prior to doing the investigation. So as Aubrey, Sasha, and I all start growing and getting more established, we were definitely going to try our best to do our homework and talk to as many people in the administration building as possible. That way, if we can get ourselves ready, we've got to prepare ourselves. And the nice thing about having Aubrey is she's a sensitive and an empath, so if anything does, kind of negative that does appear like that, we can basically put her in a trance and she can communicate with the spirits there, and using her extrasensory perception, and we can basically do our homework and try our best to prepare for situations like that, and try our best to, make sure to negate that as much as possible.
Okay. Now, when you said you do investigating, now that would be like local library and local newspaper stuff, and obviously Google. I mean, you could find out anything on the web nowadays.
Yes, it's the Google, and especially it's going on standard search engines, like so many locations. And what I've been working with is a guy named Mark Keys, who runs the Pennsylvania Paranormal Association, the former state trooper. He has a wonderful database full of stuff all over basically Pennsylvania that I've really been reading a lot lately. And these definitely are locations that might not be as established or well known, that we're going to definitely try to get going in the future as we continue to grow and get ourselves established.
Okay, and you said you've already started, or you're going to start?
We're going to be starting very soon. Last weekend we were just at Penhurst, which is a location. It's basically a mental hospital. Basically, that was founded in the early 1900s. It was basically one of the first ones to basically house people that needed to be confined. Basically, it closed down in the early 70s, but now it's available for public investigation. The public can now come out and investigate the property overnight with the ownership there. And last weekend we were actually in the Mayflower building, Sasha and I, and we were with Penn Paranormal, one of the other teams there in Bucks County, Pennsylvania. And we were on top of the building. What was interesting was on the third floor, we were actually there, and they were running the ghost box. And the words Daryl and Katie had, and also Stephen had basically appeared out of the, basically their ghost box. So we went ahead and ran the obelisk, and then basically the word Jim popped up. And so basically the obelisk is basically a device that was made by Bill Chappell, which was basically made, to be able to use words and responses by using dictionary mode. It uses the EMF field to generate words and responses, what the spirits might be saying, and we're running the ghost box. At least 4 or 5 things that came up on the ghost box were matching what had come up on the obelisk. And early pictures so far that we have taken of basically Penhurst. We have captured several orbs. one of them actually looks to be very defined, like a really thick one with like several multicolors, and that to me, like, it's a very solid one. And I took it to 9 out of 10 paranormal experts so far over the last week, and they told me that every photo that we've captured so far seems to be legit. And over the next couple of days, we're going to go through the evidence captured from the SLS camera. And what the SLS camera is a device designed by Bill Chappell. And it's basically, it uses the Kinect from an Xbox to map entities that are unseen to the naked eye. So we still have yet to go through the SLS evidence, but I'm sure we're going to be able to capture the full body apparitions that were on the SLS camera.
It sounds like you're covering all your bases when you're going in on an investigation, and I know some of that equipment can be expensive. Now I've sold 2 camera systems to local ghost hunters. And what type of cameras do you use?
Yeah, so basically we have a variety of different tools and cameras. For example, I know that our investigator Sasha is basically going to be the equipment manager of the group. She uses like a handy cam, like one of those little cameras that they use kind of like on Ghost Adventures, standard high definition light vision camera. I use a standard Sony DSC 7110. It has captures night vision, also a digital camera and recorder. And then basically we also use FLIR thermal imaging camera, much like they use on Ghost Hunters and Ghost Adventures, and those can get very pricey. But I got one because we want to be able to see if there's like hot spots and cold spots, and basically if there's any kind of entities that might pop up on them in the near future, we will be able to like basically point and click and then just save that image. And I think over the last 3 investigations, we've captured at least 2 entities that have popped up on other investigations at other locations, basically on the thermal camera. And then we also have the SLS camera, which I had mentioned previously, and the Kinect cam. We captured some really amazing evidence at the Sanderson Museum in Chadford, Pennsylvania, when we were standing near the violin case. Aubrey, who's a sensitive, had felt the spirit of a man named Mr. Sanderson, who was basically a musician. He was a violinist. He was a public speaker, and his best friend was a guy named Andrew Wyeth. So basically, they helped found the museum after Mr. Sanderson passed away in 1967, and we captured on the SLS camera 2 full-body apparitions that were standing next to the violin case while we were upstairs investigating at that location.
Oh, that's cool. Now, I've heard also with the FLIR that it's used to pick up on any heat sources or anything that's around the house that would make sure that when you're looking for your ghost, you're not picking up the sound of a water pipe or an electrical cord or something that's running in the background.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing we try to do, especially when we're just running the standard EMF field and we're trying to capture electromagnetic fields, we use several EMF meters. We use the Bell meter, which is the 8704 that I previously mentioned. We also use the old tri-field EMF meter, which is basically an old standard on a lot of ghost hunters, basically, and we use that because it's like one of the original first ones ever made. It's the old needle one, and it shows you how many, basically, it measures your units in millisaws, which is the standard EMF meters out there. And we also use King 2 meters, which are really good when you want to put, like, lay down the meter on the floor and try to see if a spirit can get it to light up.
Yeah.
And we also use, I think besides that one, we try to keep our equipment away from anything electrical or insulation, because sometimes I can say you can get false readings from EMF meters, so we always try our best to stay like away from anything that might be like, insulated or electrical. It really helps keep everything kind of open, and that way basically as we try to get good base readings, we try to do it in any room there's not a lot of electricity.
Okay, yeah, just so you know, while we're talking, just ignore the beeps. I've been fighting my system sometimes. I've turned all the system sounds off. I've turned everything off on Facebook and something. And this whole system has been fighting me on actually making that sound.
No problem.
So try not to let it bother you as we're talking. It drives me nuts, but I've tried, and you would think, I'm a computer expert. I'm expected to know how to do this stuff, but it's like it's the body man always drives the car that has primer on it. The mechanic always has a couple of wires that are not tied up in his car. The computer guy.
There's always something.
Right, yeah. You always have something in your field that you're mistaken, or you're putting it off because you know how tedious it is or whatever. And I've chased this. Daryl, and when you mentioned Daryl and Katie, by the way, they are the producers for Blue Collar Politics. And so hearing their name when you're at an active site, that I find interesting.
It really is, and especially basically up in the Mayflower building, which is one of the many, there's the Philadelphia building, the Mayflower building, and I know Pembroke has so many locations basically, and it's so funny basically that the Mayflower building I have seen top to bottom is one of the most active locations at Pembroke. From over the last 2 investigations that I've done, I've captured a lot of evidence from there, and I can remember one time we were down in the Philadelphia building a couple of years ago, just Sasha and I before the team was formed, and we were down there, and what was interesting was there was a pair of feet at the bottom of the Philadelphia building, or in the tunnel, all the way at the end of the hall, and there were, right outside the rusted out door, there was a pair of feet, so we captured it on the thermal camera, but funny thing is there was no reflective surface, because we tried to debunk it, and I just went ahead and gapped it with my FLIR, and then right at that moment, just a pair of feet on the heat camera, we had seen a shadow move literally from left to right, right past the door. Because these are areas you can't access in Penrith because they've been blocked off because of construction or because of the potential dangers for investigators. So the management went ahead and just captured that. Oh, I've never seen actual, basically, a pair of shoes like that on a rusted out door, and there's no reflective surfaces on, there's nobody around that calls those reflections. And that was one of the most interesting experiences I've ever had at Penrith.
Now, have you had anything paranormal happen to you yourself?
Over the last, year and 2 years since I started doing this, I've had several things happen to me on other investigations, and I will say, especially when I was in 2003, 2004, I was lucky enough to go down with a local team. This was before we had all the fancy ghost hunting equipment that we have now. Right around 2003, my senior year in high school, we were able to go into the General Wing Inn before they converted it over to a Jewish synagogue. And I had noticed several times, basically, I would be up in one of the upstairs rooms, basically, where people had a lot of experiences with the adding machine. Some of the accountants that would be just doing standard office work would end up adding machine would just start adding up numbers by itself. And I had several things say, Josh, and I would look around and I saw nobody there. Then all of a sudden, you just see random cold breezes, and several times I felt I had my shirt tucked up there in some of the locations of the General Wing Inn. And this was literally right after the murder. Supposedly one of the owners of the General Wing Inn in 1996, a year after they bought it, there was a murder there. And I wonder if that murder had any kind of effect on the investigation that I did in 2003. And several times, basically just being there, you make you feel like there's a lot of activity. And I remember hearing one of the stories about a car. Basically, one night when they had the bar open, the car was completely starting by itself. It had the horns on, the lights on, the windshield wipers on, and nobody was in it. And I had heard that story from one of the previous owners who had sold it to Chevette, the main line.
Wow, that sounds like a right out of the movie Christine.
Yes, absolutely, it does. And I can say, especially down the basement, when I went down there, I know that several people that have been down there have seen this Hessian soldier named Wilhelm down there at least as early as 1848 was the first reported sighting, and I never saw a full-body apparition myself there, but I had saw that I had captured I've seen a thing of smoke that was going literally from one point to another, and there's no ventilation down there. It's just a standard wine cellar. If I was supposed to be down there, it just was moving and just disappeared literally in a couple seconds. So I definitely feel that there is, that's one of the most active locations in Pennsylvania. But since it's gotten converted to a synagogue, I wonder if the two owners that have purchased it have experienced anything since then, or if it's been kind of completely just debunked. It would be interesting to get back in there at some point and get a new investigation with all the renovations being done to it.
Well, I mean, it sounds like you definitely are covering all your bases when you're doing an investigation, and it sounds like you've got the equipment. What would you say the most famous building that you've ever been either involved with, investigated, or worked with someone over it being paranormal?
Sure. I would say so far the most famous building that I have been at is basically, I would say, Eastern State Penitentiary. I've been lucky enough to go through a lot of the ghost tours there, and I have investigated there a few times. I've had cell doors slam in front of me. I have felt like the feeling of being watched. I have felt like a lot of cold spots on equipment, basically not even functioning properly. We have a full battery. You put another 9-volt battery in, and 15 minutes later, perfectly fine. I would say Eastern State, and of course Gettysburg is another one. And I'm good friends with the man named Mark Nesbitt, who runs the Ghost of Gettysburg, basically out there. And in the past, I have been at several locations there, including the Cashtown Inn, and that is basically was used as a Civil War work for the Union and Confederate soldiers in the summer of 1863. And one of the most interesting things that I had experienced there is when you're upstairs in some of the actual rooms, you get a lot of cold spots, and there's for no reason it can be like a completely hot day, and basically your temperature meters will sometimes drop sometimes in the neighborhood all the way to 78 or 80, all the way down to 67, 66.
Oh, wow.
It's kind of a look for
Makes it
a possible explanation why that happened. And what was interesting was in 1908, 1909, there is actual photo of the Cashtown Inn that was taken by a local, during the 15-year basically reunion of the Battle of Gettysburg. And one of those photos, you see that all the actual Union Confederate people that were still alive at that time, but in the far left of the photo, you can see like a full-body apparition that was recovered. And if anybody would like to see that picture, I could definitely send it, email it to me. I've been more than ready to show people. And this was back in the early 1900s, so it's definitely, there's a lot of Union Confederate soldiers still at the Cashtown Inn.
We will put at the end of the show, and this is for everybody listening, we will put any of the contact information that Josh wants us to have. We'll post that on the YouTube, and we make sure we get it. Now, it's not immediate. It's always the next day, and it's just the way YouTube works. We title it and add all our information in the next day. So whatever information you want to hand out to people, or email addresses, Facebook, however you want people to contact you, we'll make sure to get that in the show for you in the show notes at the end. So it'll be there forever. Anybody wants to watch it later or that, they'll be able to see and be able to get a hold of you if they got any questions, if they didn't pop in one of our chat rooms and talk now, which you can jump into youtube.com, just go /c/Thomas Fry 77, and that's our YouTube channel. And then you can head over to any one of the Facebook at Global Enlightenment Radio Network.com, their Facebook page. We're live there. We're live on the Blue Collar Politics Facebook page. We're live on my personal one. So we're live all over the place. We have thousands of listeners. We're in 7 different countries. So your voice is being heard in a lot of homes right now.
That is awesome. And I'm so ecstatic to be able to talk about my team and all of the research that I've conducted over the last 20 years of being a paranormal investigator, and I'm so excited to answer all the questions that will come in to the show tonight.
What would you say what was your favorite investigation?
My favorite investigation over the last couple of years so far, I would definitely say besides Penhurst at Eastern State, and of course Gettysburg, another location that I was really basically enjoyed very, very much is the Anselm Mill. It's up in Phoenixville, Pennsylvania. It's a local historical mill, and I've been there at least 3 times so far over the last couple of years with Inline Paranormal, and we have gotten some really good evidence. Sasha and Aubrey have over that time period, and it is local to Pennsylvania, Chester County, and we have captured a lot of interesting, photos. We have captured a lot of interesting, audio recordings, and our wonderful audio tech, Sasha. If you guys would like to get in contact with her and go through any audio recordings that we have captured at the Anselm Mill, I would be more than glad to tie her into a future conversation, and she could play some of the EVP that we've captured over the investigations at the Anselm Mill in the next couple of months.
Oh, anytime. We'd love to have the whole team come on here and talk about anytime. You're more than welcome to come back with your team and talk about stuff, or come back yourself if you've done something special that I know, I don't know about you, but when I'm working on something, now with me, it's, I do a lot of security, so I can't talk about a lot of the cases that I'm working on because they're confidential, they're in the court system. So it leaves me to where I'll have favorite interviews or favorite, short sections of interviews that will separate out that, was like the most awesome half hour or whatever. You always remember the ones that leave an impression, and I don't know about you, but I found I don't always, you go into one going, oh, this is going to be my favorite, and then it's the one that you didn't plan on that ends up becoming your favorite because it's the most where something happened.
Oh, definitely. In fact, next Friday, which is going to be June 26th, we're doing an investigation at basically Fort Mifflin, which is, they called it the Fort on the Delaware. Basically, it was started out like it was under British siege in 1777. It had a 64-gun battleship, and basically it was used as a during the time in the Civil War as a National Historic Landmark, and it saw service during that time. Basically, it was actually a prison camp for Confederate soldiers, and people that have been there over the years have seen spectral forms and colonial uniforms. Supposedly they've seen a full-body apparition of someone named Amos in the artillery shed cleaning his gun. There has also been basically a lamplighter seen near the soldiers' barracks. There was also basically someone named blacksmith by the name of Jacob Sauer, a full-body apparition seen him in the blacksmith shop. There have also been down in the casement is where I'm really looking forward to going with Aubrey and Sasha as we bring in our equipment, because supposedly down there, from what I heard, there is supposedly a man in gray. This is a man in a federal uniform, a full-body apparition, a no face. And also what was interesting was on the second floor of the officers' quarters, someone died there by the name of Elizabeth Pratt, who was, I think, one of the wives of the estranged officers that had lived there in the early 1900s, and supposedly people have reported seeing her, hearing her scream throughout the second floor of the officers' quarters. So we're definitely looking forward to getting down there on Friday night with the public investigation people and trying to capture as much evidence as we can on the investigators, on the voice recorders, and all of our cameras, and see what comes up, because we are hoping for something really good. And this is the National Historic Landmark and one of the most haunted locations in Philadelphia. We're definitely looking forward to diving in there, and we will reveal the results of that investigation on a future broadcast.
Cool. Looking forward to listening to it. Even if I'm the one that does it, I'll go back and listen, because sometimes I'm working on the next question and I don't always hear everything you say. I have to go back and listen to my own show later so I can hear everything that you say, because I get that question in my head, and I gotta keep that question while you're explaining something. So I'll go back myself and listen. Or Daryl has a habit of pointing out a certain time frame in my show. Like, did you hear them say this? And I was like, no, I kind of missed that. So I'll have to go back and listen to it.
And one other location we're hoping to go to here sometime in August, because I've just spoken with the people that own the Betsy Ross House. And as you know from American history, Betsy Ross was pretty much the person that designed the nation's first flag. She's actually buried there. It's on 239 Arch Street in Philadelphia with her third husband. And people that have been down to the basement have seen basically voices of someone saying, pardon me, pardon me. And they've seen her at the bedroom, at the foot of her bed. So there's definitely feels like Betsy's spirit there, but she's very sad. So it's going to be interesting to know, like, it's a smaller location, but we're looking forward to getting down there by August to see what may come up. And being like it's a historical landmark as well, it's going to be a lot of fun to see what we capture if Betsy's spirit is still there.
How far would you say you've traveled to get to some of these places? Because a lot of these places I'm hearing you say, they're all over Pennsylvania.
Oh yeah, definitely. Like, I'm in a good spot because like literally like an hour east is Philadelphia, and there's like Eastern State Penitentiary. 1 hour away is Pennhurst. Another hour away is the General Wayne in the Marion Station, where I was in 0304. 2 hours west of me is Gettysburg. Like an hour and a half up the road is Valley Forge. It's like literally everything in a really accessible area to be able to go to all these locations. It's very, like, I'm in the middle of a perfect spot to be able to do all this, because it's almost like literally like 2 hours one way, 1 hour this way. So it really works out really good as we continue to establish ourselves and grow. We're basically in a perfect spot, and I think the Philadelphia area just has so much history to it.
Oh, I mean, there is so much that has happened right around where you live of American history. People don't realize that of just how much happened in Pennsylvania, New York, all those areas in and around where you live. Now, I grew up in Ohio, not too far. I grew up about 20 minutes from the Ohio-Pennsylvania border, and we had some really cool. I was going to ask you, if you ever do get over near Ohio, there is at West Branch State Park, there is an old graveyard from the 1800s that when they built the dam and flooded the water, they moved all the houses and the people out. Well, they didn't move the graveyard because it wasn't going to go under the water. So it's been known as the witch's graveyard. But I'd gone there in high school and had the crap scared out of me, but I wasn't sure if it was real or not. I would love to see an investigation of that.
Oh yeah, definitely. In fact, we're looking, as we continue to grow and establish ourselves, we're looking going out to Mansfield Prison out in Ohio, which is an old prison that dates back to, that's one of the locations that all investigators say to go at. You get a lot of paranormal experiences at that location. So that's definitely on our bucket list, and the graveyard is definitely of interest to us as well. And I will share all this information that we get from tonight with Aubrey and Sasha, and we're going to sit down and start generating a list of locations that we're going to start checking out here in the coming months. And I just love some of the stories from Philadelphia that have been captured over the years. As you basically know, history basically. Philadelphia basically was the intellectual, the political capital, the cultural capital in the late 1700s. And the first Continental Congress was held there in 1775 at Carpenter's Hall. And then basically a lot of people have been to independent thought, seeing spirits of the founding fathers, basically hearing icy chills, cloudy forms. And then in 1994, a park ranger, when I was reading my research, was setting alarms and basically saw at the foot of the staircase an actual figure from the 18th century. And there's also been seen Benjamin Franklin. It's one of the founding fathers. And of course, the Poor Richard's Almanac, the Franklin stove, bifocal electricity. I mean, everyone knows Ben Franklin. His spirit is being seen at Library Hall. basically for many, many years. So it's an amazing location, and there's so much here, and I just love like the history, and there's so much you can learn from it. And I highly recommend if anybody ever gets a chance to check out some of the ghost tours in Pennsylvania, they would have a wonderful time.
Oh, yeah. I'd recommend any of the tours, not just the ghost tours, but the American history tours. I mean, to take those tours around some of those old buildings and stuff that are still standing from the 1700s.
Well, like Valley Forge is a good example. We have talked to the park rangers down there about doing a possible investigation there in the near future. And the history of Valley Forge is pretty interesting. In order to keep an eye on the British in 1777 after the Battle of the Brandywine, which was basically we needed to find a way to keep an eye on the British who were occupying Philadelphia at that time with General William Howe. So what we had done, Washington designing Valley Forge to be able to be isolated enough to a point where the British couldn't go in and attack it, and also to a point where the armies that would come out of there by a Prussian by the name of Baron von Steuben, who would bring state-of-the-art drill packets to this raw material, which was the Continental Soldier, basically was able to use this location as a training ground. So for me, to be able to get down there at some point in the future, and number one, also there's ancestor statue, General Anthony Wayne statue on the south end of Valley Forge. To be able to investigate some of those old cabins, you never know what kind of energy that might be there, whether it's a residual or an intelligent haunting. A residual haunting is basically one that is like a tape recorder that plays itself over and over again, a place memory. And there might be a lot of place memory at Valley Forge, but there also might be some intelligence spirits that are still there from the actual Continental Army or the British might still be there, basically still playing itself, it's directly interactive. So we have looking forward to getting down there here in September.
Sounds like an interesting time to look forward.
Absolutely. And another location we're also looking at is the Iron Steel Museum up in Coatesville, where Aubrey lives. This museum basically dates back to the late 1800s, early 1900s. It was founded by Rebecca Lukens, who was the owner, or my dad worked at a company called Lukens in Coatesville, and basically it's an old steel mill that dates back over 200 years that was founded as Brandywine Iron Works. And in the Steel Museum, people have seen a lot of shadows, shapes, basically voices. That's another location that we're looking into. We have spoken to the museum director, and they're going to try to talk to the board there about getting us in there sometime in July.
Okay. I forgot my question I was going to ask you. See what I mean? I was trying to go on, and then I got to listening to you, and then I forgot my question. The one thing I was going to tell you was that Witch's Grave is about an hour north of the Mansfield State Prison, so it's not that far away.
Beautiful. So it's definitely in the same general vicinity, basically as the Mansfield Prison. And I can say we're going to dive into, in the second half of the trip, we're going to dive into the history of Summerwind. So that's going to be really interesting. I know my fellow colleague, Craig Nearing, has been to Mansfield Prison, and he might know about the cemetery that you had mentioned. I'll definitely have to ask him.
It's well known. I mean, it's no secret. It's right on the main road going into the state park, and you know how well those are marked.
Oh, absolutely. And I know cemeteries are usually the best place to find paranormal investigations, and I highly recommend, I definitely will be checking with the township itself when we get out there at some point. Make sure to call them and make sure to get permission. And I highly recommend anybody that wants to go out go for on a paranormal investigation. It's always good to cross-check with all of the property owners and make sure to get permission. Legally, they don't get any kind of trespassing charges and stuff like that. So it's always good to do that. And I've seen a lot of paranormal teams go out and try to legend trip and try to experience locations, but it's always good to check with the management and make phone calls. That way you can cover all your bases.
Speaking of covering your bases, now I remember that question. I knew I would. A lot of times you'll see on TV, there was one show, I think it was Ghost Hunters. They're all so similar. It was the guys that usually went in two black vans, and they drive over And to me, it was always disappointing. And maybe it's just because I'm, I like paranormal and I research a little bit of it, but I take a lot of my information from meeting people like you. And when I'm watching a TV show, you see them set up like right before dark, and then it'll get dark, they turn everything out, then 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, they pack up and they drive an hour back home. Well, to me, that don't seem like that's long enough. I mean, I would think you'd have to spend a couple of days on a site to really experience, to see all what's happening.
Oh, yeah, definitely. In fact, that's what we're going to be doing with the investigation of the Fort Midland. There'll be a complete lockout, and we're literally going to be going from like literally 8 o'clock at night all the way to 6 in the morning. The idea is to basically try to spend the entire night there, trying to get as much evidence as possible. I often say that usually when you can spend as much time at a location as you can, most likely the more likely you're going to get your full body apparition or a partial body apparition, or even potentially get that ultimate Class A EVP. So I think a lot of times with some of these shows when they get started, Jason and Grant and Steve, who I all know personally, are all friends of mine, basically has done a wonderful job. I think sometimes in the early shows you can see that they didn't want to set up their equipment, quickly get out of there. I think that's where a lot of times they didn't capture enough evidence in the early seasons. But I think as time went on and the show evolved, they did get better and they did spend more time at the location as the season went on.
Yeah, I would think. Yeah, I always thought, and maybe that's probably why I didn't see the later on seasons where they did get better at it, because you get a little frustrated. They go through, you're sitting there watching this hour show, and they got this one teeny tiny little bit of evidence, and it's like, I always thought you should, back it up with, and if you got one thing, you need to stay and focus on that. I mean, I don't know, I'm not the one doing the investigation, so I guess it's a weird way of asking you a question, but how is your procedure, say, different from like those two gentlemen that did a good job and they had a show on it, and I know you have to have things on the show to have it go, but I mean, you're trying to get more evidence than one little tiny thing, I'm assuming.
Oh yes, definitely. We're actually I often say there's a difference between people that call themselves ghost hunters who just want to go to try to experience and do a brief investigation. Our team is basically considered paranormal investigators. We want to be able to do a top-to-bottom investigation of the location and spend as much time there as possible to be able to document and get evidence and collect data that we have available. And we want to be able to capture all this evidence as deeply as possible when we're going to locations. And I think some of the early seasons, some of the people out there that call yourself paranormal investigators, you want to be able to explain things with science. And I think one of the coolest devices that we had just picked up and purchased from digitaldowsing.com is a wonderful little scientific piece of things that we're going to start using as soon as next Friday, of course. It's called the Paranormal Puck 2. And what that does is it uses the app on your smartphone. You set it right up and you calibrate it. It looks like a hockey puck. What it does is it captures, you can also use like a question response mode from the ITC. You can type in anyone here, and it'll generate words and responses much like the Oculus. But the most awesome thing about the Paranormal Puck 2 is what I've seen on Ghost Adventures and other paranormal shows is that it calibrates also barometric pressure, humidity, other important things. So it captures all this data basically and displays it on your smartphone so you can see as you do an investigation. We're going to be using this for environmental reasons, and there's like charts that'll show us the different environmental reasons throughout the night as we investigate. That is going to be a wonderful piece of tech that we're planning on implementing as soon as we get to Fort Mifflin next Friday.
Okay. So you haven't had a chance to use this new piece of equipment in the field?
Yeah, this will be the first time that we are going to be using the Paranormal Puck 2. We purchased it from Bill Chappell, who runs designs all the gear equipment from Ghost Adventures, and I know Bill personally through a former colleague, and basically it will be the perfect piece of equipment to use. So we want to be able to go in and do a top-to-bottom honest investigation and get as much evidence as possible. And with Sasha being a Civil War reenactor, a sound tech, she's going to handle all of the audio that comes out of the audio recorders, and then we're going to focus on documenting all the evidence and writing down like all the environmental data from the Paranormal Part 2 and any experiences that people might have. And then I'm also going to go into find out any like property records and town hall records to find out if there's anything that could have happened on the location of Fort Mifflin. We're going to be doing that. And also Aubrey, with her being a sensitive, we really make a great team, and we're looking for more members to be able to add to the group as we expand and grow. This team is definitely going to be more diversified as we continue to get more experience.
When you're talking about you'd like to grow the team, why don't you describe to the audience what you would consider the perfect team going to a site?
The perfect team going to a site would be, in my opinion, basically, you have a sensitive or empath like Aubrey, which we already have on the team. She's got over 20 years experience investigating, and she works in many cases. Basically, she's got all the knowledge to be able to teach us and instruct us. We've already got the perfect, basically, sound technician who's going to capture all of the audio for us in Sasha, basically, who is still not out of college. She's got a lot of talent, and I think that she's going to do a wonderful job handling all of the equipment for our group. And also, we want to be able to, in my opinion, another part of the team, having the team documentary, making sure documenting all of the evidence, which is already what I'm doing. And another thing that we also would like is to be able to have someone that can help us set up a DVR system. I think that would be another perfect team member that's knowledgeable on how to set up basically all your cameras and all the locations of activity. And we definitely would like to have someone that has knowledge of setting those up, because then we could set up a command central and have the 4 cameras basically set up much like Ghost Hunters would, and then basically have all that evidence being captured and shown live to the entire world right on YouTube. So we're definitely planning on looking for a person that can help run the command center as we investigate. And also we need a case manager, somebody who goes in, emails locations, makes phone calls, basically much like Donna used to do for Jason and Grant and Steve in the early days of Ghost Hunters. We're definitely looking for that case manager who can handle all of the cases and work back to back with Aubrey and setting up the investigations. Because the only thing really at this time that we're missing is someone that knows how to set up the DVR system and someone that knows how to contact locations on our behalf and to be able to set up paranormal investigations. So I did have learned quite a lot from speaking to Jeff Bellinger, who is the writer and researcher from Ghost Adventures, and he has gave me a lot of valuable advice on how to take the role of a case manager and how to be able to apply that in different aspects of investigating.
Well, we will have to have a conversation after the show, because I happen to own a company called CK Custom Security Consultants, and I've already sold 2 12-volt DVR complete mobile system that all you have to take is a computer screen and a mouse, and the system, it's BNC connectors, you can set it up, you go up to 1,000 foot away, and you can have up to 8 cameras hooked up to the system, which will see perfectly at night as well as they do during the day. So I got you covered on that, because that happens to be my specialty.
That is amazing. Because we've been looking for a good DVR system over the last couple of months, and we need, I think, something that we can finally set up like multiple cameras. And this one that you got seems like it really will fit the investigations that we're going to be looking to do and looking to capture the evidence that we're going to be trying to collect. So the DVR system is kind of like the next step in the evolution of this new team that started at the end of 2018, and basically getting the DVR system will be allowed to set up the command center, and all of this can kind of rotate. So we'll have like a couple of people on our walkie-talkies, and we've actually just purchased 4 of those. So as we go to locations, we can communicate each other from the first floor, second floor, all the way down to Command Central. So we'll be able to relay messages to each other over a vast distance. And that's the nice thing about having a walkie-talkie, is that as you investigate and collect evidence, you'll also be able to basically radio down whenever we're ready to wrap up and, break down the equipment and see what comes up on the equipment.
Right. Yeah, the last DVR one, the new ones that just came out, you can put up to a 4 terabyte SSD 2.5 hard drive in them, so they can really store some information. And you can do it in the brand new ones, which are expensive, but they'll do 4K. 2.7K does just as good, and it does it for half the cost. I even did that with my cameras in the studio. I have all 2.7K equipment, because if you think about it, the people that are listening to the show and, their friends and family, who can buy a $10,000 TV to truly see what 4K? And then you're still limited because the wire coming into the back of the TV can't transmit 4K. So the chance of actually seeing it is slim to none. So it always cracks me up when people, I gotta have 4K. You can't watch it, so because the screen's not capable of it. So
exactly. And I think especially having a good quality DVR system is going to take our team to a next level. And what's really cool is basically we have spoken to Maria Schmidt. She runs a big event every year called National Ghost Hunting Day. She is the creator, and she created that with a guy named Brian Cannon, who I just seen 2 weeks ago at Penhurst. He was on the show with John Zaffis called The Haunted Collector. And John Zaffis is the nephew of Ed Lorraine Warren, and Brian was John Zaffis' tech manager on The Haunted Collector. So he's a good friend of mine, and somebody who told me, investing in a good 4K or high definition DVR system is definitely going to help us pay dividends in the future.
Well, we can talk. I'll be more than happy to answer any question you got. I know those, the technological, I can't even say the word. The tech end of it, there's nothing I don't know about it, down to, minute details. But I don't want to go off and do a sales pitch on you during the show, but just get with me after, and I can give you all the information that you can take to your friends and find out, oh, yeah, this will cover your needs.
Absolutely.
Now, one of the nice things, you saw, like in Ghostbusters, they take 2 vans, and I think they took 2 vans more because they had people to travel than equipment. Because it's not that big, is it?
Yeah, a lot of times with a lot of teams, they're very diversified. I noticed at Penn Parallel has only 10 members, another parallel team has 8 members. So especially when you have a lot of members, for example, TAP started out with like Jason, Grant, Steve, and Tango, and eventually at the end of the season ended up with like 10, 12 members. It's always important. That explains why they had a lot of things as they were growing and establishing their paranormal society. They had to get more and more hands because of all the equipment and all the other people that were coming in and out of investigations. They would send multiple teams in to do a lot of investigations. So as you continue to expand yourself, sometimes you're going to need more and more vans. I would not be surprised in the future if Cinema and Paranormal will continue to grow and evolve in the coming years, that we're going to need more and more ways to be able to get transportation to and from all these locations.
Okay, now we've reached 9 o'clock, so I've been kind of holding off on this one subject to the second hour because I wanted to start fresh with you, and I want to hear everything. I've read a little bit about this Summerwind Mansion, and I've read a little bit of the history on it, but in reading the material that you sent me and the stuff that I've been able to look at, you know a lot about this.
Oh, yes, definitely. I have been one of the ones that has been pretty much the creator of the rebuilding project of Summerwind that started in 2014. And Summerwind has a lot of history, literally from all the way back in the 1920s, all the way up until today, there is a lot of history to cover on this. And this is like an entire hour that we're just going to spend. Basically, I'm going to be talking on behalf of the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters and the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society and the experiences that they had while investigating Summerwind in 2014, 15, 16, 17, 18, and 19, and what they've experienced in the last 5 years of collecting evidence.
Now, the place burned down, right, to where there's only the two chimneys left.
Yes. What happened was, I think we need to go back to the beginning, but I will say that the place burned down on Father's Day of 1988, and there was a man that lived next door to the property, a man named Jim Lechner, who lived next door to Summerwind until 1992. His uncle had a cabin that was right next door to Summerwind, and of course, in the haunting episode, when you watch that episode, you find out that they say that thunder and lightning had taken it down and destroyed the mansion into nothing. But according to his neighbor, the township itself was involved in the destruction of Summerwind in 1988. And a guy supposedly that was working on the fire department by the name of Harold Ramish had basically given Jim Lechner, and supposedly he had seen Ramish at this location and other members of the town board that were getting tired of all the people that were trespassing and vandalizing all the property and legend stripping in the 1980s. And basically the town itself had leveled the mansion down and put straw inside of it and spread straw throughout all of the guest quarters, the servant quarters, the mansion, the main house itself, and just burn it down. And that article, I believe I had sent to you on email. You can go ahead and post that up onto YouTube. It's a whole bunch of pictures that will be covered from Father's Day of 1988 that were basically posted in that article that was commissioned by Jim Stengel from the Milwaukee Sentinel, so that basically people can see how it was burnt down and how the township was basically getting tired of all the trespassing. So that makes a lot of sense to me, if they decided that, people were just.
They do one illegal act to stop other illegal acts. Let's burn the place down so people don't. I saw the pictures of it, which I will post the pictures on Facebook, and I can add them on to the end of our interview on the YouTube thing tomorrow when I'm done, because they're definitely. They got pictures with someone standing in them, so you can see, a human for reference, and you can see the building before, and you can see how it could be dangerous walking through that building. I'm sure the floors and ceiling weren't that safe on that, but I thought the history that you sent me on that, I was reading that was quite interesting.
Oh, definitely. And let's go into the history now. This place is amazing. So basically, a man from Ohio by the name of John Frank in 1914 had created, originally the place was called West Bay Lake Fishing Lodge. And he was from Ohio, and he was a well-known merchant from the, I can't remember exactly, Cleveland or Cincinnati, that area. So he originally named it West Bay Lake Fishing Lodge. And it's funny, Craig Nearing had found an old flyer from, I think, somewhere in the 1940s, and supposedly at that time, it was a fishing lodge, and you could stay there for $10 a night. So basically, 2 years later, Mr. Frank decided, hey, I want to go ahead and sell this property. And what's amazing is he went ahead and sold it to a man by the future U.S. Secretary of Commerce by the name of Robert Patterson Lamont. Mr. Lamont was the Secretary of Commerce under President Herbert Hoover. So and basically in the 1920s, Mr. Lamont he employed two basically famous architects in the 1960s. They were converting the fishing lodge now into Summerwind. He employed Chicago architects Thomas Talmadge and Vernon Watson to basically level the property and completely reconfigure it into a mansion, servant quarters, and a child's house. That took about 2 years up until 1918. And it's basically what's really cool is we have the original blueprints 4 Summerwind, which were really quite hard to find, but we have them in our possession, and we are planning on using them to restore the mansion. And what's amazing was when Mr. Lamont was there in the 1920s, supposedly he had experience, like a lot of the servants had told him that the house was haunted, and that supposedly there was a woman in white that was seen near the kitchen, that was like floating above the, basically in the back part of the doors, and supposedly he completely said, oh, there's no such thing as ghosts, and then basically, until he himself had a paranormal experience one night when eating dessert, and this was covered on Haunting, Season 1, Episode 2, The Haunting of Summerwind, when Mr., at the time, they were called Mr. I can't remember Mr. and Mrs. Murray, I think, on the episode. I can't remember the exact name of what they were called, but at that time period, they were Mr. Lamont and his wife were eating basically dessert in the kitchen one evening, and then all of a sudden, like, they're hearing the basement door, like, literally starting to shake. And what happened was, all of a sudden, it revealed the ghostly form of a man, and supposedly Mr. Lamont grabbed his black powder, basically pistol, fired 2 shots at the door, and thus missing the ghost and never returning to Summerwind. He had passed away in 1948, and then the property, over many years, it had 20 owners from 1948 to 1968. It was purchased by a lady by the name of Mrs. Kiefer. In the episode of A Haunting, they called her Mrs. Murray. They did that, to protect the identities of the people that were involved.
Right.
And so Mrs. Murray was the name of the person that they had given the name to. So over the next 20 years, it just kind of, people would buy it and basically then just would revert back to her again. So it's kind of like they're running up the mansion until a family that had come in the summer of 1969 by the name of the Hinshaw family, basically, who was a local family from Wisconsin. They had first laid eyes on Summerwind, and I'm a friend of the family, basically Ginger Hinshaw and her husband, Arnold. So they named themselves the Hinshaws, but their actual real name was, I think the husband's name was actually named Jim Hale. So they did that, Team Hinshaw, and basically to protect the identity of the people. Right. So when the Hinshaws had, when she first moved in, she had to have the house. She wanted it. It was a house that, was the ultimate fixer-upper, according to the Hinshaw family. And this place, Summerwind, when it was built, it was one of the first places to have running water. It was one of the first to have steam heats. It was one of the first to have a lot of modern conveniences, electricity, in the 1920s. So when the Hinshaw family moved in, they all of a sudden basically felt a lot of things weren't right with the mansion. They had started seeing basically dark shadows, basically that was just, all of a sudden that was flickering light through the hallway. They would hear muffled voices in some of the rooms, and Ginger basically herself had started walking into some of these rooms and basically started, experiencing a lot of different things that had happened. And at one time, supposedly the windows would open by themselves, close by themselves, and at the point where it happened so much, Ginger had pleaded to Arnold, and Arnold, unfortunately, got to the point where he had to start nailing all of the windows shut because they kept moving on up and down by themselves, and it got to a point where he had to start nailing all of them shut, and literally, that's when things really started escalating on the property. And this is not covered in the book, but there's a story in the book, Carver Effect, The Paranormal Experience. It was published in 1979 by Wolfgang von Bober. It's very hard to find, but if you can have a copy of it, it's one of the coolest paranormal books out there. So according to the book, and this was not even on the haunting episode, there was an actual crawl space in one of the rooms, basically behind a dresser. And behind the dresser, there basically was this crawl space. So basically, Mr. Hill / Mr. Hinshaw went ahead and shined his flashlight inside the actual crawl space, and he noticed a skeleton with black hair. Basically, he couldn't really get a good look, but he thought it was a dead animal. So according to April Hinshaw, who I know is her name's April Douglas, basically Mr. Hinshaw had sent his stepdaughter in to go in and check out this crawl space. And according to what I had heard, supposedly she went in there and she completely screamed and was terrified of the skeleton that she had seen in the crawl space. And then a couple of days later, it was reported that Mr. Hinshaw, who was a construction worker, basically, and he had literally was trying to go to work. Basically, the car caught on fire by itself for no reasonable explanation other than basically, could have been, maybe little people in the property, could have been the ghost there. It's so hard to say for sure what had happened. After the skeleton was found, then Mr. Hinshaw started going absolutely crazy. He basically started trying his temperature started increasing. He basically had started screaming at the kids. And I know he had 3 kids of his own, and then Ginger had 3 of her own. It was reported by quite a few people that, after the situation, he started playing the organ. They actually had an organ inside the house. I think it was either a Wurlitzer or a Hammond B3 organ, and supposedly he started playing the organ to all hours of the night, literally from one spot to another. So when he started playing the organ, the kids had become so terrified, they literally had to stay in one room in the house. And it was also reported that when the Hinshaws would have tools, when they had workers coming down to work on the furnace, for example, or work on some other part of the house, these tools that the workers had would disappear and they would reappear somewhere else, literally from one point to another. And it was interesting that a lot of workers who had tools, appear, and no one wanted to work on the property or try to get the place off the code. And it was also reported a couple of days later, after Mr. Hinshaw started going mad and playing the organ to all hours of the night, it was reported that supposedly Ginger Hinshaw has reported trying to commit suicide. Now, I don't know if that's in the book and it's legit record, but that is what I had heard. And then literally 8 months later or 9 months later, the place went back to the Lillian Keeper again. And basically she, Hinshaw, Ginger had a complete mental breakdown, and it was reported by the Hinshaw family that Mr. Hill, Mr. Hinshaw, had committed himself to a mental institution up in Canada somewhere, and they had never seen him again. So now we're going into 1972, 71. A couple of years later, a popcorn vendor by the name from Chicago by the name of Raymond von Bover. He was the father of Ginger Hinshaw, and he basically saw, he basically heard that Ginger had this house, but she had a lot of things happen to her. So Ray Sr. and Ray Von Bover Jr., who owned the original Blueprint Stone, Ray Jr., were looking for a project, and they wanted a bed and breakfast to be able to start their business and have a nice little location. So went ahead and basically Mr. Von Bover had contacted Mrs. Keeper about the possibility of purchasing Summerwind from her, but unfortunately Ginger had pleaded, please do not commit to basically buying this place. It's evil. It's not a location that you want to be able to check out. But unfortunately, Mr. Von Bover decided, well, hey, I'm just going to go ahead. I don't believe any of the stories of ghosts. This is all just hogwash. He went ahead and decided, I'm going to go ahead and purchase this property. So over the next couple of weeks, they started just trying the Von Bover's, Ginger's brother and her parents basically started trying to make it go to the place again. They started trying to convert it. They were trying to paint the walls, get it up to the code, try to get it to a point where it's now fixable to be able to have a bed and breakfast inside the location. So they went ahead and basically tried as much as they could, and they never stayed on the property. It was reported, according to the book and according to Ray, they actually stayed out on a trailer on the actual property. And what was interesting was Ray Von Bover supposedly had what we call residual haunting, a place memory of the past. One day he was in one of the rooms, painting by himself and just doing some standard, renovation work, spraying some of the paint. And supposedly he had a place memory of seeing the bullet holes that were actually there from when Mr. Lamont was there in 1935 when he fired 2 or 3 shots at the door and missing the ghost. He had seen that. He actually basically started touching the basement door and started having a place memory or something that's embedded in that environment of basically those bullet holes and recreate the events of the 1935 incident with Mr. Lamont. And then basically, a couple of days later, Mr. Von Bober, Ray's father, was starting to measure room of the actual property. And according to what I had heard from Ray's father, Ray, and basically April, is that when Ray Sr. would pull out the blueprints and he would start measuring the length and width of the rooms, but according to the book and according to Ray Jr., the rooms on the actual blueprints actually changed shape. So basically, the mansion rooms actually changed shape according to they've been completely different than the original engineering diagrams from Summerwind. And I found that very interesting because I've never known an actual haunted location that actually where the rooms have actually changed shape, and that was coming from basically Ray Jr. So they have the Von Bovers have a lot of similar problems that the Henshaws had. So when they try to get workers to come, or they take example someone to come work on something, same thing would happen before with the tools being misplaced or things just being like out of whack. According to another thing that was interesting, according to the haunting episode, was a couple of weeks later, Ginger had went ahead and wanted to put her father and her brother under a trance, under hypnosis. So basically, but after putting them under hypnosis, all of a sudden, according to the Carver Effect book, which you can buy, basically there was actual to a point where basically all of a sudden, Ray Sr.'s voice started changing, and he said, "I am strong, you are weak. My name is Jonathan Carver." And supposedly there was, basically according to this trance that Mr. Ray Von Bober Sr. had, basically, according to this trance, basically Jonathan Carver was haunting the Summerwind location, looking for a deed for the northern third of Wisconsin, basically, which he had negotiated with two Indian tribes back in the 1700s. He had died at a pauper's grave in England during the early 1800s, but we are working on part of the project with one of the Carver descendants named Shell, who has been fantastic at working with us. So, according to the trance, basically, then she put Ray under hypnosis, and he started, and according to Ray Jr., he still has an old cassette tape of these sessions, basically, still like put away from the 1970s. And so basically, around 1979, unfortunately, the Von Bovers could not make it go to the place, and they experienced the same problem with the construction and all the other things that I just mentioned. So they sold the property back to Lillian Keeper right around 1979. So she was starting to get older. 6 years later, she died in 1985. So basically, the property was purchased by a local company, a local couple from the cross by the name of Harold and Babs Tracy. Harold and Babs basically were looking for something unique. So Mr. Tracy, who basically was looking for a fixer-upper, wanted to do something unique for his wife for basically her wedding anniversary. So he comes back to the deed of Summerwind. And what was interesting was when the place was still standing from 1986 to 1988, basically it had supposedly seen thought the mansion was inhaling, basically like breathing by itself. And I've never seen anything like that before. That's walking up to the location from the driveway, they had thought the mansion was like, literally inhaling, and that's never been done before, never been done after. And then, unfortunately, as I had just described earlier, when the town of Land O'Lakes burnt down Summerwind in 1988, basically they got tired of all the trespassing. And Craig actually grew up 30 minutes away from Summerwind. He basically is from Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and literally created the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters up there. And they've been friends with the Harold and Babs Tracy for many years, and they have done public campouts there over the years and captured a lot of evidence, basically, which is on fbghosthunters.com. So as we go into 1988, when it burns down, now we're going to fast forward until 2014, and that's where I kind of come in as a vested stakeholder and interested person in Summerwind. So one day, I started watching an episode, the Haunting episode from 2005 on the Discovery Channel. And this is a really fascinating episode. I just want to start going into reading about the history, the location, because I, as you know, I had previous interest in the paranormal. All of a sudden, I come on this website, which was still running at that time, which is summerwindmansion.com. So I noticed on one of the tabs there was a section that said about the history, all the other things, and like where to order the Carver Effect, the Paranormal Experience book. And the other part on the bottom part of one of the menus was an actual thing that said blueprints for sale. And I said, holy heck, the blueprints for sale for Summerwind? And at that time, they were going for $50,000. But of course, there was a contact button, so I had said, hey, how much do you want for a copy of the original blueprint? So all of a sudden, I emailed the person. It turned out to be Ray Von Boger Jr. So not only do I purchase the copy of the blueprint, but I also purchased the original blueprints. I actually got them for a much cheaper deal than that. It only cost me a couple $1,000s versus basically $50,000. I got them the lower asking price, and I all of a sudden then seeked out a connection to Harold and Badge Tracy. So about 2 weeks later, I buy the blueprint, so now I have them in my possession. And all of a sudden, I come across a news feed on Summerwind on YouTube. And there was one of the messages at the bottom where in the comment section had said, Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, Craig Nearing. And Craig said, we've investigated here many years, and I've got my own team, I know the owners. I said, hey, if you know the owners of the property, I have the original blueprints of Summerwind. He said, hey, please call me, we'll talk. Then all of a sudden, basically, we sit down, and Craig and I start talking, and we start thinking, like, what is the opportunity to read? And I basically said, I got the blueprints. How about we think about rebuilding it? And Craig said, that's a really good idea. Nobody has attempted to rebuild the mansion since 1988, so kind of sat and dormant for 26 years. Then all of a sudden, we started getting interested in, like, having serious discussions about this. So what we did was in September of 2014, we reached out to a guy, a writer for the Huffington Post. And unfortunately, I could not make some of the benefits that we started, but I reached out to a local writer by the name of Corey Shostel, who writes for the Huffington Post out there. And basically, we had, I said, Craig, hey, why don't we start a camp out there, and we can have people come investigate the location, and we can start raising funds for the rebuilding of Summerwind, and we could start basically October 3rd or 4th, and then do another one at the end of October 2014. So we did 2 investigations there, and this was the first opportunity where some people can come out legally on the property and investigate. Literally, it was like $30 to $40 a night, and you could camp out and pull out a tent if you had one, and be able to investigate the property all night, and all the funds raised from that basically a Summerwind would be put towards the restoration fund. So we started just kind of building slowly in 2014. And what was interesting was in the basement section of Summerwind, if you can see the location, there's actually underneath in the basement is what we call this one section of Summerwind that's leveled off, and you can still go inside underneath the arches. And there was a guy that used to work with. He had passed away in December of 2019 by the name of Kevin Mallett, who's a paranormal historian. He hosts the Paraversal Universe Radio, and also the founder of the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society. Kevin was a close friend of mine and confidant, and he started working, the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society started joining up with the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters. And what was interesting was the second public investigation we done, right near the arches, Kevin had captured a shadow figure moving from one thing to the next, and I think that's still under Facebook, under Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited, and you might be able to find it on their page. So the best thing to do would be to contact Jennifer Mallett, Kevin's wife, who still runs the Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society, and basically she might be able to supply that shadow video that Kevin had captured in 2014. So now we got a year under our belt. We got basically a couple of investigations. So 2015 we start going on, and I started contacting other radio shows to say, hey, would you be interested in doing some more stuff for Summerwind? So we just got featured in the Huffington Post and the Milwaukee Sentinel in 2014. So we rolled to 2015. Then all of a sudden we start going and doing more investigations. So instead of going from 2, now we start doing 3. So we do one in June, July, and August. And in May of 2015, we get featured on Coast to Coast AM with George Norrie. and basically George does 2 hours each with Craig, Kevin, and Jennifer, and I booked that one, and that was a fantastic interview. That's still in the Coast Insiders archive section. And then basically a couple months later, we get other podcasts start wanting to do a show on Darkness Radio with Dave Schrader, and Fade to Black with Jimmy Church, and other hosts that started wanting to cover this project. So over the next couple of years, we started just growing to a point where we started getting more funds coming in. And the best thing about the investigations were to be able to come on the property legally and to be able to do a public investigation, get your own evidence. And what was really cool is Craig's team has captured a lot of evidence over the last 3 years while investigating Summerlin. Since 2009, he has basically, one thing they've experienced there is a rock throwing incident where they would be investigating the property, and basically they would throw a rock into the foundation, and the rock would come all of a sudden out of the foundation. And literally that's never happened anywhere else but Summerwind. And basically Craig had pretty much been able to have that experience at rock throwing. Another thing they did was they took one of their investigators, one of the girls on the team, and put her in isolation by herself, on the edge of the property. And literally, she was running her audio recorder. All of a sudden, a raccoon basically falls into her lap from the tree. And literally, when they go back and play the audio, they found out basically they actually said that the spirit voice says, "I pushed it." So literally, there was an EVP that was captured right when it says, "I pushed it," right when the raccoon fell in the girl's lap. And then another thing they had captured was several EVPs that say, "Little girl dead is your friend." So there's supposedly a little girl in there by the name of Lucy that actually is known to haunt Summerwind still to this day. And I wonder if the little girl Lucy was somehow tied to the skeleton that was found there in the 1970s by Arnold Hinchell. Coincidence? Quite possible. So really interesting story. And then, of course, over the next couple of years, Kevin and Jennifer, we start getting 501c3. So Craig, in 2016, 2017, had reached out to several people and started getting an estimate on the blueprint. We had basically gotten original estimates of what is all being covered on the blueprint, and we had gotten estimates anywhere from $300,000 to $1 million, depending on the building codes and all the things that would have to be done. I think the original estimate that we have vetted from several contractors is about $600,000, roughly estimate, to be able to rebuild the entire property all the way from scratch. And then 2016, 2017, we finally got 501c3 coverage, which technically means when people donate to the restoration project, basically there are people's donations that are tax deductible, and they go towards the rebuilding of Summerwind. And basically, the idea is to be able to build this as a bed and breakfast, or build this as a museum, so that way we can open it up to the public. So instead of people coming there still trespassing to this day, we can now people can now come down there legally to be able to see the actual location as it sits in all the glory. And the person that was investors that were willing to donate to this project would actually be able to help, owners would still own the property, but they would be able to run a business on that property, which is pretty amazing. And with all the history there, we've got now the 501c3 backing. We now have been featured in Paranormal Underground magazine, the Milwaukee Sentinel, the Huffington Post. We've been featured on all the top radio shows in the world, including Beyond Reality. So now we're moving forward with the project in year 6, and we are now to a point where there are other potential ghost hunting shows out there, and certain producers that are interested in doing an actual, possible documentary in the future.
That would be cool. And if you get that far on it to where you have, I would love to come out and do a live show right from the middle of it. That would be,
definitely.
That would be
what's really interesting was back in 2017 when Craig's team was there, and Maria Schmidt from National Ghost Hunting Day, who's a friend of mine, a colleague, we had done a live stream. Craig had done a live stream investigation around October or September, late September or October in 2017, and it looks like literally right near the steps of the summer wind still exist. Because it kind of leads you up to the actual mansion, or the foundation, and the chimney. Right near the steps, you can see there's an actual floating woman video on all the way to the right. So it goes from the right side and kind of fades out. But if you go to Facebook under Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, you can see that video should exist somewhere on their page. And that was captured by one of the people that was doing one of the live public events at Summerwind.
Okay, you said that was Fox Valley
Ghost Hunters.
Ghost Hunter.
Yep.
All right. Well,
Yep.
I will just take a quick look. Oh, there we go. Goes to Fox Valley Ghost Hunters Facebook. Taking us right to it. Cool. And because I can post, if they've got a video on there, I can post the link up in the chat room, so anybody watching can watch the video that we're talking about. So I will attempt to join that group, and if for some reason I can't, they don't answer me tonight, it'll, tomorrow, for whatever, I will make sure it gets posted up on Facebook with, under your banner from the radio show. I'll repost that with the video so they know where it's from.
And also the video that Kevin had captured, Kevin Malik, the late Kevin Malik, who passed away last year, basically, if you want to find that video that he captured from October of 2014, basically the shadow figure from Summerwind, that would be under Facebook under Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited. So NWP, Northern Wisconsin Paranormal Society Limited.
Yeah, I have that.
And there should be you have to go back into archives, and Jenny should be able to get you that video. I'm sure she's got it somewhere put away.
Yeah, that one won't be a problem. I'll ask her about it, and if she gives me permission, I'll get that one posted up too.
Oh yeah, and Jenny has been to the property many times. And they have ran the ghost boxes there with Kevin. And they have captured. And Jenny has a lot of experience. Of course, she's a demonologist. She's done CSI Paranormal. Really good friend of mine. And Jenny and Kevin have captured a ghost box thing that is at Mr. Lamont, and they believe that Mr. Lamont is still haunting Summerwind to this very day. The original person that the property was named after. And it's funny because the name Summerwind really didn't come to fruition until the 1970s. And Mr. Von Boger had basically found a sign on, basically that was laying at the end of his driveway that said Summerwind. So he named it it became Wesley Lake Fishing Lodge, the Lilac Hills, to the Summerwind. So when he found that sign, he just decided, let's go ahead and change it to Summerwind.
By the way, on the one article I was reading, it said Mr. Frank was born in Akron, Ohio in 1871. You said Cleveland or Cincinnati. You exactly hit on both sides of it. If you go right in the middle of those two cities, in the center of Ohio is Akron, Ohio, and that's the town that I moved down to Florida from when I was living in Ohio. I lived right there in Akron, so...
That's amazing. I was almost spot on. So I knew it was somewhere in that area. I couldn't remember because it was that story.
Yeah, well, Akron used to be the rubber capital of the world, and then Goodyear, and the only tire company still in Akron is Cooper Tires, and they don't even build their tires there anymore. The headquarters of Goodyear Eagle Racing Tires, their offices are there, but they don't make the tires there anymore. So it's no longer... If you drive through Akron, there is a certain section of town where the original building from the 1800s that Goodyear built, it's still standing. There's a bunch of the old buildings, but most of that property is kind of run down now. And they got big, huge fences around it, but we've explored it a couple of times because they got... they have a racetrack there where they test the tires and all that. They did that right up till, I think, 2005 when they finally shut that down.
Yeah, and what's amazing is that basically that whole area itself is so historical, and knowing that Mr. Frank was one of the people that actually came from there in the 1870s and basically moved up his way to Summerwind is quite amazing itself. And what's amazing is there is, I think the main cause of the haunting is Summerwind are a couple things. I want to say, the first thing I want to say is probably there's Indian burial mounds up there. I do know what
Oh,
I
they're
have
all
researched.
over Ohio. They're
Yeah.
the most famous one is still to this day unexplained. Is this giant snake mound built by the Indians where they built towers like kind of like fire towers so you could see it because it was
Huh?
you can't see it standing on the ground. It was designed, and you think about it, that was built back in like 1000 AD, and it was built to be seen from the sky, but yet we had nothing, supposedly, we had nothing that would go up that could fly that high to see it. So, that's one of those mysteries like the pyramids that, go on.
We don't know about. Exactly. And what's interesting is we feel a lot of people that come at someone and trespass is because people are thinking there's a deed there. I mentioned the Jonathan Carver type. I have read Jonathan Carver's travel journals that are basically go into detail about his journeys all over the Midwest. And I know that he, unfortunately, according to one of my research, he never made it as far as Summerlin, but people still to this day go to the actual location because they've seen the haunting episode and dig into the foundation trying to find the deed that was found in England like decades later, and still trying to find that deed. And it's like so funny because how basically Carver was trying to negotiate between two roaring Indian tribes out of Wisconsin, and then basically people still trying to dig looking for it. It's like, it's not there, So, basically we have to.
I got a question. Was that place just called a mansion because it had running toilets and running water and all that stuff before anyone else did in town? Because it didn't really look that big to me.
It's not. When you actually go inside, like according to blueprints, it basically wasn't as big as what it's seen. I know there was a bunch of other houses on the property that were originally there when
log cabins. It had 4 small cabins with the main building.
Yeah. Yep. There was a servants' quarters. There was a playhouse, which was like a child's house. There was the main mansion. All of that was burned down in '88. But we're just trying to restore the main mansion itself because we feel it would have more historical value if it was just the actual the building itself. Because all the extra houses would cost too much extra, and really you don't need all that. I think just the main mansion itself and all of its glory, and then we can open it up for a bed and breakfast or a museum. That'll be up to Craig and the owners. They would have to decide what that would have to be doing. But I do know that there's a lot of interest out there from people that want to be able to make something out of this thing. And exactly what happens is the future is going to be up in the air, and we'll see what happens in the coming couple of years of exactly what happens with the property. It'll definitely be interesting to see if more evidence is collected and more things happen with it.
It's one of those sites that, from what I'm hearing from you explaining, and your knowledge of the history of this is second to none. I mean, you have really done your research on it, because everything I read in that article, which wasn't even done by one of the main people, but it was one that I found on the internet that came up with those sites you were telling me about. And I always like to get these the travel writer opinions and stuff. They're a little bit more of an outsider, so they generalize in different areas. And that was the article I was referring to you from.
Yes, and it's amazing because there's so many books out there. And what's interesting was Walter Cronkite in November of the 1980 episode of Life magazine had mentioned Summerlin as one of the most haunted mansions in the world. And this was back in November of 1980 after the Hinshaw experience, after the bomb over, to get it back to the keepers. And then, of course, there's been other people. And then the Carver Effect book, A Paranormal Experience, that is very hard to find. I know there's a couple still in existence out there. But I'm kind of hoping eventually trying to talk Mr. Bob over into re-releasing it and publishing it again, because I think that book is a really good read for people that want to be able to read up on someone. And also, I had worked with an author in Wisconsin by the name of Devin Bell. I released the original blueprints for her so she could put them in the book, and she wrote a fantastic book in 2016. She's an expert on haunted Wisconsin, and she's an author up there. Basically, where she goes into the really good details. If you can't find a copy of the Carver Effect. I highly recommend picking up Devin Bell's book, and also Wisconsin's Most Haunted 1 and 2 by Craig Nearing from the Fox Valley Ghost Hunters, and also Archives of Ghost Hunters by Craig, where he goes into details about all of these locations. And he mentioned Summerwind as one of the main sections in volume, Wisconsin's Most Haunted Volume 1.
Okay, well, wow, you said it was the #1 haunted place in the world?
Yep, this was mentioned in the 1980 Time magazine. It has Walter Cronkite on the cover. I think it was mentioned in the magazine itself as one of the most haunted locations in the world. I'll see if I can find that for you guys and see if I can scan it and put it on PDF for all the listeners out there. If they would like to read this article, I might be able to, as soon as I find out, dig it out of my storage bin and scan it for everybody, and I'll get an email to any of your listeners who might be interested in seeing this magazine article that was from November of 1980.
Well, I think what we can do is, I got a website, www.bluecollarpolitics.org, and where I post a lot of American history. And I think this would be a good start, especially with your knowledge. I could have you write what you know about Summerlin. I can build a page onto it, and we can give a permanent place that I can post a link, and I do that with a lot of the other links that I get from the radio show. I'll repost them every once in a while. The top 10 links to go read after, hearing one of the shows. And
absolutely.
We could build a whole page for it.
And it'll be a lot of fun because I know practically.
What was that? Josh?
Sorry, still there?
Oh, yeah. No, it kind of cut out for a second.
Anyway, what I was going to say was, so technically, that would be fantastic, and there's so much stuff that you could do in terms of referencing stuff. Like you can pull, I can email you different articles that have been written about Summerwind. I can try to see if Ray gets the permission, I might be able to scan parts of the book, the Carver Effect. As long as I get his blessing, I might be able to show. And so the funny thing is, if you go to Jimmy Church's website, which is faithofblackradio.com, there's an old post from 2016 where I actually scanned the original blueprint, and I'll be more than glad to defend those photos again. All Summerwind. I actually showed people pictures of them, and I scanned them, and I put them on Jimmy Church's website at that time. Basically, and I worked with Rita, his wife, on scheduling it. I'll be more than glad to get you guys, the listeners, images of what the main house looks like and what what was being done to it back in 1916.
Yeah, that would be cool to see. I mean, just it has such a vibrant history to it, and it's got such a I don't even know how to describe it, a vibrant paranormal experience that has been going on since the some way back in the 1800s, and still goes on to this day. Even though the house isn't there. No, that brings me to another question. Have you found in your paranormal studies that when a house is demolished or burned down, or any site that you're on that has paranormal activities, do they remain there after the building has been torn down?
Absolutely. I have seen that many times at many locations where I've seen places like, at least out here at PA, and places over in Wisconsin where Craig has been, where sometimes buildings are rebuilt and are remodified and changed from one thing to another, and sometimes the activity has increased quite a few times at these locations, from voices and people being touched and heard and spoken to people basically having all sorts of things, like their hair pulled and stuff like that. So I believe, especially when this place, if it is ever rebuilt, right from the original blueprint, I believe this location will be of interest to many, many people, especially when you look at, for example, Zach Baggins' Haunted Museum out in Las Vegas, where he has all sorts of stuff from his paranormal collection on display for everyone out there in Vegas. We would like to build our own version of the Haunted Museum out here in Wisconsin. So we definitely feel that if this place is renovated and worked on, the activity is going to increase like through the roof. And anytime you attempt to modify or change a structure, according to Jason Haas, Steve Gonzalez, that basically the activity will increase like more and more that you do something. So it's like you're changing whatever was once there for that entity. They're going to want to come back and they're most likely going to start, wanting to make themselves known to you more by working on something or building something. So I feel a lot of these historical locations that have been destroyed, and sometimes when they get built into something new, the ghosts and the spirits remain, but even if they modify the land, I've seen it before happen many times on watching a haunting and doing paranormal studies, that ghosts stay attached to the land, and they have some kind of unfinished business there.
Right. So, from the way I understand it, we're talking some of these ghosts there are 200 years old.
Oh, absolutely. And I could definitely say from Summerwind, if the place dates back to like literally the 1900s, and then if you factor in the Indian burial mound there, and Jonathan Carver, who supposedly, as Craig and Kevin have run the ghost box up there and captured the name Jonathan Carver on ghost box several times. He basically was an explorer back in the late 1700s, 1760, 1770, and with the Indian tribes, you might even talk about potentially 900, 1000 AD, who knows how far back the Indian tribes go back there, probably way back in the early part of the, well before Jamestown and all of that. So there's definitely a lot of activity. So up in that area especially, so you might have spirits that are still there to this day that might be from like the Native American spirits from the 1400s, the 1500s, all the way up to Jonathan Carver in the 1700s, all the way up to Mr. Lamont in the 1900s. You might have all sorts of centuries covered at that location.
Well, that would make that site worth rebuilding just for that. I mean, because if you're talking Indians, you're talking going back, you're not just talking going back 200-300 years, you're talking going back 10,000-15,000 years.
Oh, absolutely. And especially at that location, because it's so interesting because it's way up in the upper UP of Michigan. It's almost like all the way up on the northern third of Wisconsin, way up towards Michigan. Like literally, like Michigan's like a mile away. So, basically, in order to get there, there's actually a Facebook group where people can join to interact directly with the people that are running the project now, which is Summerwind Haunted Mansion. It's a group on Facebook. It's led by Craig and Michelle Fontana, who is the descendant of Jonathan Carver. And Michelle basically answers questions for all your listeners out there. So if you look up Summerwind Haunted Mansion on Facebook, people can go there and see what's being done with the project, events that are going to be there this year, investigations, any questions that you may have on Facebook can be asked right on that page.
Okay. My work is going to be cut out for me after the show because this, I'll tell you this, Josh, this will be the most I've ever posted after a broadcast. As far as all the links and to pass on all the information, it almost seems like we would need another whole show just to go over the links and everything that you have access to that a person. I don't know of another haunted place that has this much information available on it.
Oh, it's so funny too, because when you especially look at like some of the rooms in certain parts of the original mansion, it looks very eerily similar to Amityville, which was basically, I'm sure you read about the Amityville case, Edna Ring Warren that we're working on, and Ronald DeFeo murdered basically the entire family that the priest and his home family that lived there. And then, of course, Timothy Luck comes in and has a lot of paranormal experiences. So it's funny because it has like the certain parts of the architecture of Summerwind almost matches Amityville to a T. It's almost eerily similar,
Oh, wow.
And it's amazing. So we also have to show you certain aspects of the house, and you can see like a shape of the house almost matches certain parts of Amityville's house. I'll also show you guys, the pictures, and go to Google image search and type in Summerwind. There's so much photography out there. And my group can be reached, Thin Line Paranormal, on Facebook under Thin Line Paranormal. And that's where you can talk to Aubrey, and I would more than glad to provide my contact information on this interview as well. So any of your listeners that have questions, I would more than glad to answer anything and talk to anybody.
Okay, and we've added the banner while of what everyone can see, so they. I got your name right up there on the page that's being showed. Rather than doing commercial breaks, it's so interesting in what we're talking about. I haven't even. I don't know about you. If you need a break, we can take one. But
Let's keep.
I've been rolling our ads and stuff on the show, so we don't have to literally stop and take a break. They can see everything. We put the ad back up for this show. What we're talking about. It's a new way I've thought about doing this because I don't want to take away any time from you being able to talk because your knowledge is extremely in depth, and I want to give you enough time for you to be able to get it all out of there. So, well, normally
Yeah.
in a 3-hour show, I got about a half hour, 40 minutes of advertisements, and lately I've been just showing them as we, scroll through different scenes as we're going through the show. That way I can get more time to talk with you and to get
Yeah.
all your information out that you need to. Like Thin Line Paranormal, I'll put that link in Facebook and YouTube chat rooms here. Your Facebook page, the link to it, so people can. Now, is that how people would get a hold of you?
Yeah, that'll be Aubrey, the team leader, but I will be more than glad. Unfortunately, I do have Instagram, but I'm not on Facebook at the moment. But I am working on getting that reestablished in the near future. But in the meantime, people can reach me under email, which I will be more than glad to provide that
Okay.
to Daryl, and he'll post that out to basically all of the people in chat. So that if people have questions on anything that I had covered tonight, I will be more than glad to answer anything by email. And that way people can basically ask me any kind of inquiries about my ghost hunting team or my paranormal investigations, my UFO research. I mean, there's so much more we can dive into in future
Right.
episodes, basically. And
you're
we're going to
friends on
definitely dive
Skype,
in
so if
a lot of more.
a lot of questions I don't realize till after the show. I won't get them till after we're already done because we have so many different Facebook pages we're on. We have so many different groups. I've already noticed there's a couple watch parties going, so um, you know I can't see everything on my screens. As many screens as I have, I can only watch 5 or 6 of these at a time, and these are the main ones that I put them out, and then they get restreamed from there. So when they're restreamed, we're still, it's an issue. We're trying to work it out to where that way I can get the questions faster. But you're friends with me on Skype, so I'll just Skype them over to you, anybody that asks a question, and then I'll send it right back to them. And we get enough of them, we'll just pile them all up and save them for another show and have you back on, and we'll just start going. Because we've only talked paranormal, and I know you know so much more than just paranormal.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Like, I know a lot about, like, I'm well versed in, uh, I'm well versed in, like, politics. I've done a lot of research. I have worked with the Libertarian Party in Pennsylvania. I have done a lot of stuff for Ron Paul's presidential campaign. I have done some stuff with former Governor Jesse Ventura before. I have done a lot more, and I'm always starting to get started and scratch the surface of what I can do. And I really look forward to revealing the results of next Friday's investigation at Penhurst with everybody on the next show and what kind of evidence may arise on that investigation. I'm really excited to reveal the findings of Fort Mifflin and what's going to be what we capture, at least on our equipment.
I'm looking forward to seeing your report from that. Now, next week we have the great Jordan Maxwell on. So that 3 hours is taken, but we definitely can. We can even do, if you'd like, after you get done back with your show, we can do like a little 10-minute podcast on the immediate results, and then we can refer them back to a show at a later date and time, and you can go into depth about it, because with all this equipment you've gotten, I'm excited to see what you're gonna find at your next event.
And what's so really cool is actually Grant Wilson. The funny thing you mentioned ghost hunters because one of his team members is going to be there. It's going to be a public investigation. Everyone can come out to it. The cost is not bad. We get 8 hours. We're going to be in for entire night, so I think it's like I got it for $50 because my team members are covered much. But I think it's like either 80 or $100. But you get 8 hours of access to Fort Mifflin, an actual historic landmark, and this is open to the public. And what's amazing is that Daryl, I think his name's Marston, he's one of the guys on the new Ghost Hunters, is going to be there doing a lecture, and another guy from one of the other newer shows on Travel Channel called Ghost Brothers, Mustafa. He's actually one of the team members of basically one of the other guys on Ghost Brothers is actually going to be there as well, and they're going to be giving lectures and like answering questions about paranormal investigating. This will be next Friday, and this is going to be a really wonderful opportunity. So Aubrey and Sasha and I, and basically myself, are going to be there investigating, and we're going to be meeting people, and we're going to go out and investigate and see what comes up. And in the future, we're hoping to build a website here in the coming months. Also focused on getting ourselves a YouTube channel so we can try to live stream our investigations so everyone can watch us. And that will be the goal in September when we sign up with Maria Schmidt for National Ghost Hunting Day. We're going to try to live stream, find a location of interest that might be appealing to everybody that no one's investigated before, and live stream it so everyone can see us around the world, investigate and try to capture evidence. That'll be a lot of fun.
Oh, it sounds like it. You need to do something down here in Florida so I don't have to go so far to go to an investigation. I think that would be cool, especially being
phenomenal.
A techie as I am. I could bring equipment that would blow your mind on what it can record.
That would be fantastic.
A friend of mine,
we've actually looked into several lighthouses down there.
We've got a lot of lighthouses down here in Florida and a lot of haunted ones.
That's awesome. And those are the kind of locations that we are definitely interested in targeting in the near future as we start building our name and establishing ourselves. We basically want to be able to get those locations and be able to hit them up like as much as possible because the lighthouses always got great ghost stories attached to them.
There are 22 lighthouses down here. 2 of them are private that you cannot have access to, and 18 of them are haunted.
That is fantastic. And I heard supposedly the one story of a lighthouse I watched in Home of History before on History Channel, and supposedly one of the episodes was haunted in Maine. And according to that, one of the lighthouse keepers that had basically had a bride back in the 1980s, but the place was, or back in the 1850s sometime. And supposedly he had ordered a piano that was shipped in from a shipping company over in France. And according to the legend and the story, basically the piano only had one thing of music, but the problem was the woman would keep playing that song over and over again. The husband, the lighthouse keeper, went mad, killed his wife, and supposedly people still to this day hear the piano music being played, and there's nobody there at that lighthouse. So that's really interesting story that I pulled off from basically Haunted History, which is amazing History Channel things you can learn about. Just by watching old episodes on YouTube, you can just increase your knowledge a lot just by watching these episodes.
That's how I got to catch up on all the Ghost Adventure episodes I missed was on YouTube. I mean, I don't even have a TV hooked up anymore. I watch all my TV on YouTube.
Absolutely. And what's so cool is basically in the future, I'm hoping that we can do some investigating. Like one of my dreams is to bring one of my best friends to a location. I would like at some point, as my team grows and gets more established, I would like to bring Katrina from Paranormal Lockdown down to one of our investigations, or if we meet her at one of the other locations, because my best friend Gwen went to college with Katrina, and she runs the world's or the largest soup cook-off in Pennsylvania. Basically, that she does every year, 2 or 3 times a year. So I'm hoping at some point in the future we can start bringing down some bigger names to help us with some of the events. That's definitely on my bucket list of things I would like to do.
Oh, with you being involved in Summerwind, I mean, there's almost no end to it. With that being such a world-renowned site, it shouldn't be that hard to get the bigger names to come and do investigations with you, and that sounds like you got some fun to look forward to.
Absolutely, definitely. And I'm really excited about finally, like, just getting down to, like, Fort Mifflin and, like, all the other dream places. Like, there's so much out here. Like, we just have an endless cap of what we're going to be doing. And the best thing is we haven't really got started. We got a Facebook page now. We're going to get a website coming. We're going to be doing, we're going to be setting up a YouTube channel soon. So all this is all like going to be available for everybody. So I want everyone to like work with us and help us grow. And this is a wonderful platform to be able to do that. And we're truth seekers. We're out for the truth. And this is the best way is to get the information out there to the public so people can see it. And I look forward to having some EVPs from Fort Mifflin. Hopefully by the time the next investigation comes around and we have results for you guys.
Yeah, well, that's why I say, I talk about, in my intro, I talk about the rabbit hole and the truth. Those are the two most important things that I'm concerned with.
Yeah.
I would never tell a lie. I only speak the truth, and I love the rabbit hole. I always, when I find them rabbit holes, I want to find the bottom of it.
Absolutely, and that is the key is to dig for information. And out there, there's so much out there that we can be able to expand upon and be able to research. And there's so much stuff that's available to us: our local libraries, our newspapers, our magazines. We can finally get information out there to the public that is made so easily just by looking things up. And this is like the beautiful thing of being a paranormal investigator. I always encourage people to go out there and shoot for the stars. And I even have a whole other show that I can just do on Amelia Earhart. And my work with a group called Tiger.
I think they found them skeletons out there. That's Amelia Earhart. Everything, it works out. They even found it. They just couldn't prove it, but they found the plane landed on the beach. Do you remember this? You know what show I'm talking about?
Yeah, so basically, the funny thing is, let me go ahead and mention the ties. I'll go into that topic now. So we're going to change direction this hour. We're going to go into the Air Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery. As you know, Amelia Earhart was a famous pilot that was born in Atchison, Kansas in 1895. She was basically, one of the first pilots, and she became the first woman to fly across the equator, or fly across the Atlantic Ocean in 1927. She also basically became the first woman to fly the world around the equator in 1937. Then she vanished into thin air and was never found again. And here's where the really interesting thing is: my mom used to take care of the horses for Rick Gillespie and Pat Thrasher. They are the executive directors of the International Group for Historic Aircraft Recovery, or TIGAR, and they started basically trying to focus on finding Amelia back in 1988. And Rick basically was, he met with a couple of his famous archaeologists, Tom Gann and Tom Welling, and they were former navigators. And basically what they had proposed was if Amelia had not reached Howland Island on July 3rd or 4th, 1937, she could fly 350 miles southeast to this island called Nicomaroro, which is in the Republic of Kiribati, basically, and land there where they had a reef. So basically, they had proposed this a theory. So what Rick did in the summer of 1989, he went with senior Tiger archaeologist Tom King, who I know, I've met him before, and Dr. King was basically a good researcher and a good friend of the people that ran the Phoenix Island settlement scheme. So they started going down and just started researching this actual island. And what they started doing, they started cutting open a lot of the brush with standard machetes. And they started going in the village of Rissus. And there was an actual colony established on Nicomaroro in 1939 and ran up until 1963. And there they started finding airplane parts. They started finding metal rivet patterns. They started, all of a sudden, there's all sorts of parts that started appearing. And basically, they went into one of the actual officers that was stationed there in the 1940s by the name of Gerald Gallagher, and they found his residence. And so, supposedly, there was a woman on the island that stayed there in the 1940s. Her name was Emily Piccoli, and she said supposedly, according to what her dad had told her, they had seen an airplane basically on the reef, a Lockheed Electric Penny airplane, NR-1616, something like that. I think that's the exact serial number. Amelia's plane. They had seen it washed up and down the reef, then it would just reappear, then go back down into the reef. So Emily Piccoli had given Rick
the exact location of this airplane in 1999 when she was still alive and in the last few years of her life. So what was amazing was that Amelia, ever since she vanished, no one knew what happened to her. So they started the largest search for her in history. The USS Colorado started going after her. Her husband, George Putnam, who is one of the top publicists in the world, started searching for her. It was the largest search in the history of finding somebody this famous. And also, Amelia was supposedly a friend of the Roosevelts in the 1930s. So FDR had sponsored this research. This was all going on. And according to John Lambert from the USS Colorado, they had seen on at the time it was called Gardner Island, they had seen recent signs of habitation. But the funny thing is, Gardner Island was not known to be inhabited in 1892. So they went ahead and technically started, basically if they had just missed her, they might have just, free her. And what happened was when she couldn't find Helen Island, she flew south, and then basically she landed on this reef. And there, basically she was out of gas. So if she had enough gas to get, based on Rick Gillespie's fuel compilations, there's no way she could have gotten captured by the Japanese. That's out of question. They didn't have enough gas for that. There's no way they could have been, the thing could have crashed and sank in the ocean. I think they flew south on this island. What happened was, in order to send distress calls, so there was distress calls that were coming by nearby Awake, Oahu, and other islands in the nearby area of Gardner Island. So basically, all she would have to do is basically charge her engine and run the right propeller and use the radio. But the problem was, during her takeoff in Lae, New Guinea in 1937, she had ripped the belly antenna of her airplane completely off, basically. And there's actually footage of that on YouTube that you can see, basically like smoke underneath the bottom of the antenna. And what happened was, when she landed there, she sent distress calls. And these distress calls were done by sending powerful ionics or powerful radio waves that can be transmitted over the atmosphere. And she had two stations that she could broadcast from out of the Electra. Those were 6210 and 3105. Those two were actually part of the they're called kilocycles, or what they did back then. I'm not sure.
Right.
She could. She had Fred Noonan. She had Fred Noonan with her, who was her navigator, and most likely he was one of the top navigators in the world at that time. Fred Noonan was known to be design all the clipper routes in the Pacific in the 1930s. So when she basically took off, basically she had probably the finest navigator that she could find. But Fred Noonan did have a drinking problem, though. That was known in the media circles of Paul Manning and Harry Manning, Amelia's mechanic, and also other previous navigators. So basically, when that she had taken off, she sent distress calls out, and these were being broadcasted. And a woman in Florida, who was a 15-year-old woman, did an interview with Rick in the Tiger Archives. Her name is Betty Clank. She had written written notes. As a 15-year-old girl in 1937, she was in Florida, and she was tuning in her shortwave radio, just trying to capture the different things. And according to one of the things that actually popped up was, she actually claimed that she heard on one of the radio stations that this is Amelia Earhart. I'm in terrible trouble. Please help. It's almost like a modern-day 911 call. Here are people that are in horrible trouble, stranded on this island. It's hot. Fred Noonan's trying to get on the radio, trying to say, hey, and she's pushing them away. And she wrote down, like, every single thing, like, George, get the suitcase out of my car. Those are things only between the husband and the wife that they would know. So Fred Noonan, if these two people are on this island, imagine, like, in 100-degree heat, trying to get, like, help on this island, to basically trying to send out distress calls, and people are picking it up. Like, why didn't, like, the Roosevelt administration, like, actually listen to distress calls, and they could have saved her back then. So what happened was, like, they completely blew up the search. A couple of weeks later, she vanished, and there was never any more seen from her again. And then what happened, in October of 1937, there was a determined woman to do a survey on Sycamore in the sea, and they want to start doing this island for habitation. Gerald Gallagher, who was a British colonial officer, came down to look at this site for a possible settlement. So basically, there was an actual amateur photographer by the name of Eric Bevington. He was down there with Gallagher. He wanted to take a photo of the shipwreck on the island. On Sycamore Island, there's a very defined shipwreck on the right side. Basically, that had just, I think that burned, or that basically was an oil tanker can't remember the exact name of it, but supposedly it burnt. It was known to be on the island, and it was called the North City. And the North City was there in 1929, ran the reef, and the shipwreck was on the island. But the funny thing is, when you took the picture, Eric Evanston took the photo of the shipwreck on the island, on the left, there appears to be a landing gear, an actual landing gear of an airplane floating in the water. And this was found in 2010 by basically one of Rick Gillespie's imaging experts, Jeff Glickman, who went ahead and enhanced the photo, and then it got sent to the U.S. State Department, and then all of a sudden Rick is on the stage with Hillary Clinton and Bob Ballard, who found the Titanic, and they announced one of the Nicaraguan investigations live in front of the U.S. State Department, which is pretty amazing that happened. And being on stage with Hillary Clinton.
Yeah.
So, and what's amazing about this is over 30 years, Tiger has collected the largest artifacts in the world out of Amelia Earhart. So in 1997, they had found an old telegram from Gerald Gallagher, and he was writing about what he had found on the island. And in the bottom part of the Nicaraguan Island is actually a place called the Seven Place. It's a patch of trees that looks like an American Seven. And there was actually a castaway there that had lived and died, according to the thing. And supposedly they had found a lot of fish bones, turtle bones. Basically they had found like campfires there. And what was interesting was they found a partial 13-bone skeleton, basically on the island, southwest part of the southeast part of the island, thing right where the Seven Place is. And Tiger has investigated there for many years, and they have found a lot of evidence to suggest that Amelia could have died as a castaway there. And that evidence is, first thing they found, a 1930s woman's compact, which basically the standard makeup, basically what she would do young. They also found a jar of Dr. Barry's freckle cream, which could have been the type that Amelia had used because she liked to hide her freckles and make sure that she had basically, she was known that she did not like her freckles. She was not very confident in herself. And the funny thing is, in this bones report that was found they found a jackknife, and this jackknife was broken in two spots. She might have used that as like a fish spear to capture fish, and she was trying to cook them and live on the island. So basically, most likely the jackknife is actually in the inventory of the Rochester lectures that she was known to fly. Her flying laboratory was actually in the continent, basically on the paper. It was written down as one of the things that she had used. So that is another clear indicator that Amelia was there. And so most likely, what had happened was, I used to be a member of Tiger at SOM, they had brought down a late anthropologist by the name of Karen Burns. So she did a scientific experiment to see what would happen to humans that were, say, lay dying on the island. So she went ahead and basically started, took like a pig basically, and just a dead pig corpse and put it on the beach. And what she had noticed was a lot of the island crabs called coconut crabs. They're like almost the size of a small dog. Literally, they had went ahead and they started devouring the bones of that pig. So she felt if someone were lay dying on that island, that basically most likely the pig, that, it's an example familiar Fred was there laying dying, they most likely the crabs are already starting to devour her. So that explains why in 1940, Gerald Gallagher only found a 13-bone skeleton on the island. And, the funny thing is, too, is that basically right after that happened, they had sent the bones off to Fiji, and they basically sent the bones to a guy named Dr. D.W. Hudless. So David Hudless, who wrote down precise measurements of the bones in 1940. At the time, though, anthropology wasn't very advanced at that time, so they wrote down what they have recorded, and Dr. Hudless had basically said it was a elderly Polynesian male, aged 50 to 60, but when Karen Burns, our lead anthropologist, went ahead and started going into the actual evidence of, she examined the Hudless report from 1940. And she determined something different. She put those measurements into a modern-day anthropology software called Foradisc. And Foradisc is basically, she put in all the measurements, and from the long bone measurements, and from all the information, she said the person would be about 5'8", European female, white ancestry, and the only people, that woman that could have matched that was missing in that region in 1937, 1940 was Amelia Earhart. So, based upon this report, Richard Janet's basically one of Rick Molesky's anthropologists that replaced Carter after she passed away, determined that the those most likely were 99% likely to be in the yard.
And wasn't the body found like 10 feet away from, they were able to determine that was the frame of that Lockheed plane, but there wasn't enough there to identify it.
Yeah, so basically they have looked and they have found parts of the plane. I will say that they found the landing gear. Of course, the photo that exists from Eric Emerson in 1937. And they have found, the other sites, like, all the fish bones, turtle bones, the jackknife, the jar of freckle cream, all the other evidence. They found a zipper from a flight jacket. There was a sextant box that was found at the 7th site in 1940 as well. And it was known to be the same type of serial number, the same type that Fred Noonan was known to use when navigating, doing the world flight all over the world. So basically, based on this research, I know last summer they were down there with Bob Jones trying to find the airplane. And I know they found like some cables and some pulleys, but I think the problem with going around and investigating around the car, there's underwater mount. So that plane is most likely all aluminum, so all the ocean probably was like ate up or whatever remaining.
Well, the only thing that I'm working right now at a junkyard in Leesburg, Florida. I'm putting in a camera system, but it's an airplane junkyard. So, of course, the Amelia Earhart conversation came up with the owner. And now this is a man that has spent 55 years of his life working with planes, piloting, going them all. He's been buying and selling them all over the world. So he really knows his stuff on older planes, because his newest plane at his junkyard is like in the 70s. He only deals in the old, rare to find. Now, he said if you took a plane and landed it on the landing gear, did a safe landing, and then you leave that plane sit on an island for 50, 70 years, however long that plane sat there, it would literally, the way it would fall apart, the landing gear would flip exactly upside down from where it mounts in the plane, just from the way the aluminum would deteriorate. And the only thing left would be the landing gear and some the cases of some instruments and some stainless steel that's on the plane. The pulleys are stainless steel, the cables are stainless steel, so that stuff would survive. But he said a lot of it be buried by the sand. He said if you took a backhoe out there and dug 5 feet down from where you found the landing gear, you would find every other part of that Lockheed. It would be about 5 feet down in the sand, and but it would every stainless steel part. The only parts that would be gone would be the probably the cargo and the aluminum body of the plane.
Exactly, and a lot of that would have been disintegrated and destroyed by the ocean. So if there is anything left and the Tiger continues to investigate, you might be able to find parts things that are indestructible, such as the wheel, parts of the fuselage, maybe parts of the actual things that are identified, the landing gear, things that are really made of harsh stainless steel that would survive.
Look at what they found in the Bermuda Triangle, looking for those 5 Avengers. They found almost 40 other Avengers that are complete. Now, they went down in the 1940s, and all trainer planes, and they lost a total of 87 planes from right in that area, from pilots that would literally get lost and die. And they found so many that they gave up the search because they had over 20 of them that they could not find the serial numbers enough to identify, but they found several patterns, because that's not, people don't realize, that's not the only group of 5 planes that went down and got lost in the Bermuda Triangle. They didn't have, they had magnetic compasses, so, and it's well known, if you go in the Bermuda Triangle, your compass will spin. So you can't use, and if you look down and identify the wrong island, you're screwed, buddy. Because
absolutely, I think a lot of this comes down to basically the Bermuda Triangle. I feel is like some kind of big time shift thing. It's it's like a dimension. Like, as soon as you get lost, it's like you're getting completely moved into another whole other dimension. And it's so funny because he mentioned time travel and each, different people, like, certain, particular time travel experts out there. There's some kind of, like, big pole shift, basically, down there. It seems to be, there's, like, when people get lost down there.
There's two things going on down here. And ever since I moved down here, my research has picked up because I've talked to a lot of people that have lived here all their lives and know what's going on. Most of the ships that have gone down, they've gone down because of methane. Now,
yes, or lack of gas, or maybe like lack of
when you lose buoyancy. Right, when you lose buoyancy on a 500-foot long ship and you lose buoyancy over the center third, that ship's going to fold in thirds and sink to the bottom in 2 seconds.
Absolutely.
You'll have no time. You won't even have time to do a radio call. Now, the planes are getting lost and the people are dying because of the aeronautics cannot withstand the magnetic anomalies that happen. Now, that only that only explains maybe half. Now, the other half, and mainly, I'm thinking of one in particular. There in 1901, a ship called the Ulysses, whatever its name was. It was seen several times as a ghost ship later. Now, that one would be, the time dilation field, or it would be time warp or something that they're all over the planet, So what do you think about what I said?
I think a lot I kind of agree 100% more with you. I think a lot of it basically has to be, like you said, time shifting and different things that are going on throughout the, history. There has to be a certain time there, a certain war point that is causing these things to disappear, and all of a sudden they're found, like, decades later. Especially, like, for example, you've seen, like, so many of these, for, like, other shipwrecks and other famous, like, locations, for example, like, for certain, like, particular important, like, airplanes and landmarks, and this stuff basically seems to me it comes up decades later because all of a sudden it's just found again, it just magically appears out of nowhere. So I cannot agree more with what you're saying and what you said. I mean, you hit the nail in the coffin.
There was, to me, the nail in the coffin was the pilot that lived. Now, there was a pilot that took off in a Cessna 372 twin-engine, 9-passenger plane. It's an hour and a half to fly from Bermuda to Miami. Now, he has records when he said this is N9092, I'm ready for takeoff. They logged down what time he left. So there was radio communications, there was a logbook that said when he left, there was plenty of witnesses. Nobody's going to change all that information. That's just too much. And now, he shows up in Miami 20 minutes later. And he talks about a cloud circle that he flew into. Now, if that doesn't prove that there is something going on with time as well as magnetics in the triangle, because he lived. He flew from Bermuda to Miami in 20 minutes on a flight that should have took him an hour and a half.
And I also wanted the same idea when Amelia was flying the night of July 3rd, 1937. When she was there, it was Fred Newton trying to find this island. I wonder if somehow, not saying it's a time trip like the Bermuda Triangle, but I wonder if, like, basically it was so hard to see, like, a mile-long island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, if that basically she could have been somehow pulled into this time shift, or basically she got completely moved from one point to another, and that was always the interesting paranormal aspect of her disappearance, basically, where she was found, like, people claim that she was Irene Bowl, and this lady had facial dystrophy. There's forensics revealed that there were no relation to each other. I've heard the same idea if, like, the area around Howland Island is similar to the area around the Bermuda. Right. I think 100% that they're connected, but I wonder if there's that possibility that they could be somehow,
Have you heard, I've heard people, say different things. Oh, she wasn't that good of a pilot. This woman flew in a very bad storm with a plane running on empty and landed that thing in England, crossing the Atlantic during the storm with the last 10 miles with no fuel. So this woman knew what she was doing behind that in that cockpit, and she had, like you said, one of the world's best navigators. So for the time that they're living in, you have the two smartest people in the world flying a plane that has a flawless track record. It's one of the most reliable planes on the planet at the time.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that she got lost flying a straight line? Bullshit.
It doesn't make any sense.
Exactly.
It doesn't make any sense. And I think especially, like, this was called the Flying Laboratory. I mean, this was, she had to give lectures, and basically, in order to pay for this plane, basically at Purdue University, she did a lot of lectures and speaking engagements, and this thing was, like, probably the most state-of-the-art airplane in 1937. It had pretty much, like, one of the most advanced radio systems in the world at that time. It had the most, best fuel consumption in the world at that time. And one of my favorite people have always talked about this topic was a patriot on the crash and sink theory by the name of Elgin Long. He's an older guy now, in the early 90s, but he studied this case for many years. And although he differed from Rick in the school of thought, they both agreed upon that, what she was doing was revolutionary and very much the Michael Jordan of her time, because not many women were doing aviation, flying airplanes around the world, and she was the first woman to not only cross the Atlantic Ocean and fly across the Atlantic Ocean, but she was also the first one to create the 99ers, the first women's all-female aviation club, which still exists to this day. She was like the Michael Jordan of her time. She was like the Lindbergh of female aviators.
Didn't she even beat Lindbergh? One of her records beat Lindbergh, or someone that was that famous at the time. She was just that good of a pilot.
Oh, she was, and she knew what she was doing, and it was kind of very much it's very courageous. And there was a movie made in 2009 that was actually consulted with Elgin's consultation that actually called Amelia. I think it was with Hilary Swank and Richard Gere. I'm not exactly certain. I can't remember the name of the other actor, but it was actually a phenomenal movie that kind of showed like just her life and broadcasting, like what kind of times, different things that she has accomplished. And I'm just so thankful to know that, yes, I believe that there are many Earhart descendants that I have talked to, I have known many years in Kansas, that want the airplane to be found in a mystery solved. And I believe that Rick Gillespie and Tygar are definitely almost hot on the trail. And if you were to take their evidence and take it to a courtroom, I think hands down they would. This is where her final life was. This is where it ended, and this is where where she is. Her remains are, if they exist somewhere. And what's amazing was I did talk to Tom King, who worked with Rick Gillespie many years, and they might have found a skeleton of the castaway that was living there in 1940. This was a recent development on, I think it was on Travel Channel or one of the Discovery episodes. They might have found a
I think that's
skeleton.
The one I've been referring to.
Yeah, yep. That was fantastic. And I could always, if you guys ever want to book Rick on your show, I could definitely ask him, hey, would you be interested in doing this? And he can go into all the details that anything that I didn't.
Yeah, that would be one for the books. That, we got Summer Wind today. I would love to have an expert on Amelia come on, because there's so much she did that was not, that we've never heard of that she did. And I was under the understanding that the radio equipment that was on that plane was military, because she was talking with the military ship for, I think they said 2 hours before she hit the storm where she got lost. She was chit-chatting with U.S. military ships. Now, you don't take off on your plane and then tune in a military aircraft carrier. You have to have their radio pre-installed.
Oh, yeah. You see, what she was actually had a radio system that was able to communicate with the Coast Guard at Itasca. The Itasca was pretty much stationed right on the island. And when you read, what's really cool is even today the National Archives and the Freedom of Information Act allows people to be able to go access the radio transmissions that Amelia was sending back in 1937 with the Coast Guard gunner at Itasca. Her signal was loud and clear, so she was right near the vicinity of Howland Island. So I believe, based on my research of Earhart and basically being close to Rick and Elgin, that either the plane is in two spots. If she did crash and sink, it's in the northwest part of Howland Island, or
it's somewhere along Nicaraguа, and basically right along the reef, where basically what happened was with the tide, when you have a rising tide on the island, it just pulls it in. It most likely pulled in the airplane, and then boom, they were just left there stranded. So I believe it's either either the plane crash and sank, or it could be on that island. So either one of those theories, one of them's going to end up being proven right at some point.
Right.
Whether it's Elgin Long or Leslie, we shall find out, hopefully in the near future. But finding the woman is, I think, one of the most important things. It's the greatest unsolved mystery of the 20th century.
Well,
I was close with her stepson, George Putnam Jr. He passed away in 2013, and I've remained very close to him. And I know that he wants his old stepmom found at some point. And I do have maintained contact with his son, which is George Putnam's grandson.
Oh, wow. That's a good contact to have. I
Yes,
do have...
absolutely.
I do have the sister... All right, that's one of the greatest mysteries. I believe there's one more that we need to talk about, and we only got a half hour left, and that's why I want to bring this up now, is we need to talk about Lieutenant Colonel Byrd.
I'm not too familiar on that one, but I also, I know a lot about another case, basically, the D.B. Cooper case. I know a lot about that.
Now, yeah, I've watched every program on it. I've read everything I can. I think he absolutely got away with the money. He parachuted off the plane. We have Navy SEALs that do that all the time.
Yeah, this was back before they had airport security at that time, before they had the TSA and all these other things. Like, this,
right.
The person I think I really respected on this research is a guy named Thomas Colbert. He is like one of the most fascinating people I have ever met at a book convention before. He signed some of my books and answered a lot of my questions about D.B. Cooper. And he believes there's this guy named Thomas Rackstraw that passed away a couple of years ago that had basically, he claimed that he was D.B. Cooper, and he basically knows a lot of facial similarities between the two. Also, in 1981, on one of the beaches, basically, where right where he was going to parachuter, we got off, he found some of the money, basically kind of dry rotted, but the serial number traced back to the D.B. Cooper incident in 1971.
Well,
this guy believes that basically Rackstraw was basically hiding his identity. He pretty much just kind of brushed under the rug, and this guy technically always, when he compared the sketches of the artist's interpretation of the people, the stewards that were on the plane in 1937 with Rackstraw, it was almost like a dead match.
Well, now I was under the understanding when he bailed out of the plane, he lost one of his money bags. Because I was under the impression that they found the parachute and some of the money.
Yes, and I think what happened was most likely, like, you got to factor in, you're probably, basically he had to redirect, because he hopped on the plane, and they had to turn around several times. I think the plane at that time in 1971 was flying to Mexico or somewhere down south, and they had to basically redirect the plane, get the passengers off, and then all of a sudden basically kind of sat there and just waited for that opportunity. Factor you're tens of thousands of feet in the air. You've got wind blow against your face. You've got
the plane showed, the records of the plane flight showed it. There was one time when the plane was avoiding turbulence that it flew below 10,000 feet for about a minute and then went back up. It was only flying at, that plane at that time was only, its service ceiling was 20,000 feet. At 10,000 feet,
yeah.
You don't even need a pressured cabin. He could have opened that back door, and the only way they would have known up at the pilots is a light would have came on that said the back ramp was down, and the pilot would have looked at it and went, ain't nobody know how to open that. That, it's kind of like, oh yeah, my hood's open while I'm driving down the highway.
And what's amazing with that case also, I've always found it so fascinating, is basically what was found, like, afterward. They found supposedly, like, a couple weeks ago, the authorities found, like, a parachute. They found part of his suit, basically, that could have been ripped, basically, as he was trying to walk through. Most likely he was in a business suit. So you got to factor in, if you're wearing a business suit, most likely he tried to take parts of it off. So they found parts of torn clothing. They also found parts of his shoes. So most likely, I believe that, based on what
you're going to get anything that
Yeah.
ain't tied on is getting ripped off. That first couple of minutes is going to be scary for anybody. But then
Exactly. You got factors for parachuting tens of thousands of feet in the air. Don't let this skydiving, you're gradually trying to get down to the bottom. And I think what happened was most likely he landed in the water, and most likely he just couldn't swim. I think he eventually got pulled into the water and died. He was never seen again. Much like the Alcatraz escape with Frank Morris and the Anglo brothers in 1961. They were never seen again. Most likely the water took them in, and I think
I think they made it, and if you look back at how hard would it be to hide back in that time, day and age, it would be very easy to fake a birth certificate, go down, just go to a small town, hang out for a year or two. Oh, I lost my license. They'll give you another one. They ain't going to ask for all that paperwork. I've gone into the license bureau with half the information I'm supposed to have, and they still gave me my license. I think all those guys I think the government has to say they died. Because if they didn't, then they look like fools because they got away with it. And I think that's exactly it. The guys that boated away from Alcatraz, they never found their bodies because they didn't die. They made it to the other side. They found the raft. It was all tore up. But, of course, that'll happen. But they didn't tie it down. They let it go.
Exactly, and I got to give them credit because in that case, in that situation, like number one, Alcatraz was like the most state-of-the-art prison in the world at that time. It was a huge rock. There's no way you can get out of it. But
it was still old. It might have been state-of-the-art at the time, but it was still there were still many ways. There was many passageways that you could sneak down. There was people misuse the word state-of-the-art before 1980 because state-of-the-art before 1980 meant the latch was over here instead of directly on the door. It didn't mean nothing more than that. You know what I mean? I think people misunderstand.
What was amazing about Frank Morris is this guy was no dummy. When he escaped Alcatraz in the 1960s, he actually, I've seen this reading about this on quite a few publications. This guy, technically, he basically was reading popular mechanics a lot. So he knew technically the best way. They started digging in the back part of their cells, and they noticed there's a grill in the back part of the cells where they can get outside the prison walls and inside, right where the cell, right in the back of the cages are the jail cells. And right where maintenance is, and literally focus their way into take a whole bunch of rain jackets and pretty much tie them together to make a life raft, and to be able to build that and without the guards knowing. And then one of the other Anglo brothers was known to be an artist where he could paint faces, and actually known to be able to make all those out of paper mache, make all those fake heads basically, stick them in the beds, make it seem like they're actually sleeping when the guards will walk by.
I don't think it was that difficult. I really don't, because if you ever, all right, I don't know if you've ever been in jail, but I spent a little bit of time in jail, and when the guards don't look in on you every hour at night, they walk up and down the corridors. I think there was a lot that was, a lot of the stuff that they did was neat, but if you really looked into what's available for the prisoners at the time, they were allowed to have all the newspapers they wanted. They had glue. They had pens. Nothing that they did was elaborately unavailable.
They had books. They had everything they needed. They had basically all sorts of different tools they needed, whatever they pretty much needed. And that's why I think what happened was with Morris basically, he was a very smart guy. He knew pretty much that anything that he wanted. He was a model prisoner, so anything he wanted to get to be able to escape Alcatraz in 1961, he could get from one of the local shops or from the warden basically, because he knew the warden or the would be able to get it for him. And it's amazing how they made that life raft and then be able to survive. And according to one of there's a letter that was published. I saw on coasttocoastam.com before. There was a couple somewhere in the final parts of 2013. There was a letter that was written, I think, to the city of San Francisco. Francisco, where Alcatraz was at, but supposedly the letter claims that this person that was writing it was dying in his late 70s, and he claimed that he'd be one of the Anglin brothers that actually escaped basically in 1971. And I think there was reports literally after they escaped, the people seeing Morris and the Anglin brothers after they had landed the life draft, basically right after Alcatraz, and he changed clothes and just acted like normal members of society.
Yep.
So knowing that there could be a potential letter out there, one of the Anglin brothers, like 50 years later, saying, hey, this is who I am, I'm about to pass away, and this letter has never been forwarded to the proper authorities of the city, is like, complete travesty, knowing that, hey, there's a potential chance that we could reverse history of saying that they did survive in Alcatraz in the 1960s. And also the same thing with the D.B. Cooper case of knowing that Thomas Rastrell is trying to reverse history on that, and the FBI called it closed. But I think that Thomas Colbert, the expert on D.B. Cooper, he's going to have a D.B. Cooper documentary come out 2021, where he's going to talk about finally solving it, and hopefully the FBI might be able to change their case. So it's interesting how we dived into both those topics tonight.
Yes. I don't think we'll ever find out what the truth was on a lot of those situations, And a lot of these guys got away with it, and, I mean, look at today's world. I mean, how many murders happen? The police in a major city, take like Miami, for instance, they have up to 6 murders in one day. I've heard them on national TV, the detectives that investigate the murders say, we only solved maybe 20% of these. So 80% of the murders that happen every single day, they get away with.
Absolutely. And now I'd like to dive into one of my other favorite topics.
All right, let's go there.
So let's go ahead and dive into this one. This one's a really fascinating story. So there's actually a legend from 1865, and now we're going to dive into the Civil War. This is the great way to close the show. I thought this would be a fantastic topic to talk about. There was an old episode of Unsolved Mystery I watched in 1991 as a kid. It was about John Wilkes Booth and how he could have survived Union success. Now we're going to change direction on this one. And what's really cool about this case was that the documentary that had aired that claiming that John Wilkes Booth didn't die in 1865 in Garrett's Barn, but he had lived another 38 years under the name of David E. George and died in 1903.
Exactly.
I'm a friend of Joanne Hume, who is a Booth historian. She is married to the family on my mother's side, and on our dad's side, she is a Booth descendant. Her great-great-aunt was John Wilkes Booth, and according to her, basically, there's been a family legend passed down that John Wilkes Booth survived and evaded Union capture because the person, when they found Garrett's Barn, the Boston Corbett, who was one of the, basically, he had shot the person that was claimed to be Booth and his accomplice. I think I can't remember the name of the accomplice that was there with John Wilkes Booth in 1865.
Yeah, I think he shot him. I don't think the guy that was there to meet Booth, I think he just shot him and then burned the barn and said, oh, well, he said he was Booth, so I shot him and burned the barn. Back then, they
David Harold, that's the name.
Yeah.
David Harold, yes, who basically surrendered. So basically what happened was, I think that they basically knew, the government knew that man was not Booth, but they wanted to be able to, according to he looked like Booth, but he had red hair. His name was Rudy. Basically, he was a Confederate sympathizer, and basically was very supportive, was a good friend of Booth. But since he had Booth's papers on him, he basically identified him as John Wilkes Booth. Basically, so unfortunately, here's what's interesting was the doctor that had removed the tumor from Booth's neck in 1864, Dr. John F. May, had noticed basically during the autopsy of this man that they had killed at Garrett's Barn, he had said, the man is not Booth. Basically, he's got red hair, and he basically had noticed that. Basically, also another thing they also mistaken was the hair, the sandy-colored mustache, and basically the tumor or the scar that when Dr. May had did his autopsy on Booth in 1864, what it should have been there, that scar was not there either. So what was interesting was there was also supposedly Union checkpoints and stuff as this man by the name of attorney by the name of Finest Bates had sent this man in Granbury, Texas by the name of John St. Helen in 1870 73, 75, somewhere in that range. And St. Helens had basically told Finest Bates, who's the grandfather of the famous actress Kathy Bates, that he was John Wilkes Booth, and he said he could prove it, and he gave Finest Bates this amazing story of how he avoided Union capture. Basically, he got out of Washington using a specific password called TV Road, and he basically also told this attorney basically the entire story of how he got out, how he was able to hide, how he was able to hide in wagons, how he was able to get down to Enid, Oklahoma. Just an amazing story, and what was amazing about this story was it was all covered on Unsolved Mysteries back in the 90s, and all the parallels. The funny thing is when this guy, many decades later in 1903, when they found David E. George in the Enid, Oklahoma boarding house, Finest Batesman had kept the mummy and basically they did an autopsy on this body a couple days later after Bates took possession of it. No one wanted the body, and it was known that this person had the same 3 known injuries of John Wilkes Booth, and he had black hair. And when you put together of the there's also a striking resemblance between John Wilkes Booth and John St. Helens / David E. George, facial similarities, the 3 same known injuries. So I believe this guy was John Wilkes Booth, and Finest Bates wrote an entire book about it.
John Wilkes Booth, all right, here's something that I'll say that a lot of people that I've talked to about it, they don't even mention this. And this is the single most important thing about the entire event that happened. First of all, it was planned for a long time before it actually happened. Why? Because when the Confederate South they had a president, they had a Senate, they had their own Secret Service police. He worked for the Secret Service for the South. He was doing his job as a paid soldier, and that's what he did. He was given a mission. It would be like a modern-day CIA mission, where they set it all up. He had people working in the theater helping him. He had people out in the street helping him. He already had a wagon set up full of hay that he dove into to get him out of the city past the Union Army.
Exactly.
And he was a civil servant.
He also had sympathizers. He also had sympathizers. Besides working with Harold, Dr. Mudd basically remember he jumped from Thor's feeder, he had to have Dr. Mudd operate on his leg, on his leg, so he was walking literally crippled with one leg. And basically, what was amazing was I saw on Pawn Stars a couple months ago on Rick, one of the episodes. Actually, somebody brought a box in, a medical box that belonged to Dr. Samuel Mudd. It was authenticated by Mark Hall Patton from the Clark County Museum System out in Las Vegas, and it was amazing to know that was actually. You never know that box could have been operated on Booth when he was going, putting his foot basically when Dr. Mudd didn't realize that basically this was a killer of President Lincoln, so he just assumed it was some regular person just trying to help him. And unfortunately, I feel so bad because after that, basically, then Dr. Mudd got pretty much captured by the authorities and was known to be like a supporter of Booth, so they put him in jail. And I think they hanged a whole bunch of Booth, Harold. They've hanged all the other Booth.
So many people to cover that up. And the part that gets me is, all right, who writes history? The winners.
Right.
Well, the North won. So the North is telling a story about John Wilkes Booth when they have no clue what the actual story is, because he was a civil servant, he was a soldier for the Confederate Army, which at the time, I'm not saying it's even justified, I'm just saying it's reality.
Right.
At the time, he was a soldier and given a mission, he completed that mission, and at the time, the South believed in what they were fighting for. That's why that Civil War was brother against brother, because the people, the North writes it all as you're a Southern sympathizer, blah blah blah.
Yep.
I don't agree with that.
Not at all. And what was amazing was what Nate Orlowack has discovered in his research. Basically, he was on the Unsolved Mystery episode. He said when he once told me, which is so true in his research of the Booth escape and capture was that the government thought that that man really was John Wilkes Booth. They were taking pictures of the body. They would have, released the National Archives, but they secretly buried the body in Greenmount Cemetery in Baltimore and kind of brushed it under the rug, basically, and and kind of considered ancient history. Now, what they could do, if they wanted to reopen this case and determine if that body at Greenmount Cemetery is actually legitimately for John Wilkes Booth, there's actually Edwin Booth, basically, who is his brother is buried up in Massachusetts somewhere.
So
they could take the DNA out of and do Edwin Booth's body, take the DNA out, and then go to the body at Greenmount Cemetery and basically open that grave up with permission from the Booth family, who I'm friends with, and then boom, open it up, and if that the DNA should match from Edwin Booth and the person that they claim that John Wilkes Booth buried in that unmarked grave, and that will give 100% definitively answer to the question: did John Wilkes Booth survive, or did he die in 1865?
Right, but it won't. Unfortunately, no matter the DNA will not prove what the truth of the story is. It'll only prove that he was alive and he died much later and he got away with it. So that means the North lied about everything. So now everyone that could actually tell the truth, they're all long dead.
Exactly, and the only thing now we have, basically, according to that, is what's amazing is just this book people are supposed to check out. If you have a chance to pick up, it's written in 1908. It's called The Escape and Suicide of John Wilkes Booth. It's written by Finest Faith. It's you can still buy it today on Amazon and Kindle. It's out there available, and the entire story of John Wilkes Booth's escape is in that book. I find it fascinating to know that this could have happened, and this basically how basically everything was planned. I mean, this guy, John St. Helen, had given based an amazing detail of history behind this whole entire case, and it's amazing to know that basically the truth is out there right in that book, basically. And much like the Amelia Earhart thing we discussed right there, the truth is out there with her disappearance. It's on Nicomara Island. The truth is out there about D.B. Cooper. And everything we've talked about tonight is just a scratch of the surface, and there's so much that we can cover on the next show.
I know. We only had about 10 minutes on each subject that we were just cracking the surface on what would take. Each one of those subjects you could do a whole show on.
Yes.
We weren't able to go into it, but I enjoyed this last hour especially. I enjoyed the whole show, but I liked how we touched on a lot of subjects. We'll have to continue the conversation another show, because we got about 7 minutes left, so I want to give you at least 4 or 5 minutes. Say whatever you want to say, give out your information, and then I'll also have you send it to me through Skype, and I'll post all the links that you want posted for your appearance on tonight's show.
Absolutely. So I'd like to make a final statement for tonight. The first final statement, I'd like to thank all the listeners for letting me be here tonight. It's been an absolute pleasure and fun. I had a really great time. I'd like to thank Mr. Darrell and Mr. Darrell Neely and Ms. Katie Camara, and also you for this opportunity